All right, how we doing? Are we ready? I'm looking. John looks confused. Denise is ignoring me. I think we're good, right? All right. For recording purposes, we do need to use the microphones today. And let's see. I think it starts off with, oh yeah, we do have to do roll call. So everyone is here. I'm just going to run around. John Shada, Gloria Latimer. Here. Nate Nassif.
Present.
Julie Wolf.
Here.
Judith Chandler. Carrie Storm.
Here.
And Natalie Johnson, I'm here. Okay. And with that, the first item for discussion is we kind of have a combo, reserves and mobility parking funds. But I believe we're going to start off with reserves. Is that correct, Nate? Good.
Sure.
Nate?
Yep.
Okay. Do you want to
Yep.
you want to just
We'll just do a little bit of information. Let me just hold on. I wasn't right all together. So one of the things that we provided you in your packet is a couple of items that you may want to consider. And that is our reserve history over the last numerous years. So you can see where that is. As you know, in 19, we had a little bit lower. We were building that. We also did quite a few of fairly large capital projects. And then in 2023, 2024, I was stating we need to build our reserves in case if something occurs with the marijuana. So we worked really diligently at building reserves during that time. So it shows that our reserves at this point went down due to the 3.2 million settlement that we just paid off or will pay off on Tuesday. So it shows you where we are with that. So we're at 3.8 estimated. And I always want to say estimated because that could go up or go down a little bit once we get the audit done in July of next year. So we have that information. And then we shared information for fund balance comparisons to other cities. And if you look at their expenditures and their fund balance, we're right in there with everybody else, probably a little bit higher than most. I think it's interesting. Estes Park has a $32 million budget, about the same size that we are, and we have a $14 million budget. So it's interesting. I also want to mention Estes Park has out of all their sales tax, they get 5% of sales tax, and then they get 5% of lodging. So the city gets that compared to what we get. But we're right there.
can you share what we get just so for the
We
record?
get 3.09 of the sales tax, but we don't really get all of that because a portion of that, a small portion, goes to economic development, and then we get nothing from the lodging tax. So that's interesting just there. So we're really right in comparison with everybody else, a little bit higher than others. We're at 26. The other one that's the highest or higher than us is Woodland Park at 28. Then Salida is at 22. Salida is very comparable to us, very dependent on tourism. Estes Park is very dependent on tourism, or else they will not survive either. So and then Idaho Springs is at 3.52, which is pretty low for them. So we provided you that information. I believe that's the information you requested. So we provided that for your consideration as you deliberate over this decision.
Okay. So with that, is that we're just open to discussion? Is that?
Yeah, open for discussion. We can talk a little bit about, maybe Nate can talk about what the best practice is. If he wants to just talk a little bit about that, about best practices for cities and the best way to manage this.
Yeah, according to CGFOA, best practice says a minimum of 2 months of expenditures, or you can also use revenues. It just depends on how consistent those revenues are. I feel like we're better off using expenditures. So, obviously you can do the math on, what we're projected for this year. But 2 months worth of that. So basically 16.67% is what they recommend, like I said, as a minimum baseline. Yeah, 16.67%.
Can I jump in there?
I would hope you do jump in. Yes.
So when I researched that, it also said PS, if you're a small city with a single source of revenue, that primarily single source of revenue, such as tourism, sales tax, then you really want to be looking at a minimum of 25%. It also said if you're a city a small city that is vulnerable to natural disasters such as wildfire, you may want to look at 25% as your minimum of your annual budget to be in your emergency account. And then it said, and if you're both wildfire or other disaster and a single source of revenue primarily, then you want to look at up to 50%. So I just wanted to throw in that there's a little more to their recommendations than this 2-month minimum thing, when you get into more detail.
Those are all accurate statements, yes.
Thanks, Julie. I read that same thing.
Mayor, are you looking for an amount to start discussing?
Well, I was just gonna ask if anyone had any additional questions before we begin. Nate, go ahead.
Thanks, Denise and Finance Nate. The one thing I just want to make a point of, and I appreciate the benchmark data with the other cities is, and I think this is important for residents in the community, that one is the reserve ratio that we see with some of the peer cities. But another important question that I think we should look into is, of those cities, which of them are using their reserves to support day-to-day operations? That's our challenge as a community. So I want to make that clear, that as we think about our reserve ratio, to also keep in mind that we're using them to support ongoing operations. So I don't know of those cities, if any of them are doing that, but I think it'd be worth maybe in the next discussion to know it. So something to think about it. So thanks.
Yeah, I can look into that for sure.
Okay, all right. So I guess you're right. So there are a few questions we need to look at today. The first one I would say is, where are we comfortable with the reserves for 2027? And then I would additionally ask where we would like the reserves to be ultimately, which could be two different numbers. So what are we comfortable with as a goal for our city? And then what are we comfortable with for next year while we are still potentially in an adjustment period? And so right now, we are anticipating to have about 3.8 is where that's where we are right now, or that's where we're anticipating?
That's where we're anticipated to be based on our budget. Yes.
Yep. So we're looking at 3.8 right now. And that is what percent of our current budget?
26.91%.
All right. Cool. Okay. I know where to go. The
Yeah,
beginning of
that would be the
2027.
ending fund balance 26 or the beginning of 27. Yes.
And so the only way we can manipulate or modify that is if we make some sudden changes for the last few months of this year, correct?
If we wanted to increase that number by the end of this year.
Okay, I just wanted to be,
Yeah.
And also there's
What year we're
correct? I
talking
mean, we are talking about.
Yeah, the 26.91% is where we would be at the end of this year if the budget follows as is stated.
thank you.
Yes.
Because historically, we have often, after the end of the audit, had additional, not less.
Yeah, every year we've come in with a higher reserves than anticipated due to savings and due to revenue. And you just saw the June sales tax revenue is higher than it was a positive report. So we are at, and I know PPRTA just showed their sales tax revenue, which went up substantially also. So I think this region right now is seeing sales tax revenue increase.
Yeah. So Carrie, I know you had your hand up. Okay. Excellent. Okay. All right.
Um, You know, this is a challenging situation because as a city council, we don't want to keep more in reserves. It's the residents' money than is needed, but we have a unique situation, and some of which Julie just enumerated, in that we're really tourist-based. Inflation has gone up, it's not going down. Really unpredictable economic situation, very tight budget to begin with. So I'm looking for sort of a comfort level or a balance between, in the event there is a catastrophe here with fire or tourism tanks even lower, how do we sustain our minimum level of public safety, fire, roads, things like that. So I'm looking for a balance between that. I'm glad to hear we have 26.9%. For various reasons and more for anything else, I'm interested in trying to get our reserve fund up to about 4.5 or $5 million, just in the event, not this year, Carrie. I saw your eyebrows go up around your hairline. But over the course of the next few years, because I see this as a long-term kind of thing. I don't think it's something we change in 2027. But hopefully by 2028, things look different, 2029. So at least a 3-year plan to get there. Part of that is because the national level is so unpredictable. So if we were to have a flood, a fire, I don't know that we'll have FEMA to help us, or other reserves, assistance from the Forest Service, things like that. So I think we have to think in terms of worst case scenario also. Thank you.
And a quick question, follow up off that, and actually, and Julie maybe, or Judith. So I'm wondering if, having that goal of 4.5 to 5, would you be interested in, since you will not be potentially on council at that time, right? If we're looking at a long-term plan, would you be interested in council developing some kind of a model that we would want to approve that would look at and analyze all those different things and kind of put together something that we could work toward that's a little more substantial than an annual?
But that sounds great, Mayor. I think everything is somehow going to be arbitrary because we can't predict the future and so forth. But I think having some guidelines about that, and Nate and Denise, perhaps some of the other cities that you have talked with would have something, or Colorado Municipal League. But there surely is some kind of strategy that people have recommended.
I was just curious if you were interested in council looking at something like that.
I'm interested in council looking at it. I don't know that we're the people to develop it.
Cool. Okay. And Judith, you had a question.
Well, not really a question, just a comment for us to all be mindful of as we proceed. And I know right now we're talking about reserves. And we're not going to talk about the mobility and parking money until later. However, we're sitting at 26.91 with a 3.8 million reserve because we have taken 1.5 million out of the mobility and parking fund. And again, it begs the question, are other communities taking monies and putting them in? And I realize that we're, obviously when you take money out of an enterprise, you need to specifically use it for things like, roads and maintenance. And we are doing that. But it begs the question, is that a sustainable model? And I'm sitting at it, I also looked at the recommendations, and I didn't read all the caveats, and I'm grateful that came up because I've been on council long enough with Becca was always, reminding us, you want to be in your 25 to 30% range as a comfortable reserve. So again, I think that we can't separate those two discussions, the mobility and parking money, because if we didn't have that, and we'd be in dire straits at this moment. So.
Thank you.
So yeah, so you are looking at both together, right? And she's not separating the parking and mobility from the reserves as a conversation point. And so, but I guess, in terms of, Gloria sort of was looking at that 4.5 to 5, which would be what percent? It'd be about 40% of the budget
I
approximately.
don't know, I'm doing my little
Okay.
9th grade math here.
Would that be that? I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, 4.5 to 5 of a 36.
30 something.
Sorry, it'd be closer to like 35 to 40. So.
Okay.
But I think we should look at are we going to look at a dollar amount? Or are we going to look at a percentage? Because obviously because expenditures can change. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's see. So would anyone else like to, so Gloria kind of set that up. She's looking at like a 35% as kind of a goal, or a 4.5 to 5, depending on how you want to look at it. Go ahead, Julie.
I like to talk about percentages because prices change over time and we really can't predict what's going to happen in terms of inflation. And because the percent, the actual budget, how much we end up spending, say in 2 years, is going to impact the dollar amount in reserves. So I think it makes more sense for us to look at percentages as opposed to specific dollar amounts. And for me, I'm uncomfortable going below 30%. I'd love to say 50% because since we're both wildfire risk and single source and they go together, if we have an expensive wildfire where we, can't get our federal fund grants because we don't have the reserves necessary for our mandatory matching funds, then we're really SOL. And at the same time, if our bridges are collapsed and we've had fires, the downtown buildings burn and all of that, then needless to say, that'll also impact our sales tax. And according to that group that Becca has trained us to listen to, and I always forget what they're called, the National Association of whatever. Help me there, Nate.
Talking about CGFOA?
Sure.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Just run with it.
When they say, well, if you've got both vulnerabilities, should be 50%. I just don't think that's possible for us. And they said 25 for your absolute minimum. So if you're just one of those vulnerabilities, so my position is I don't want us to go below 30%.
Go ahead, Judith.
I agree. So for all of the reasons that Julie so well articulated, I was when I came in the door, I was in the 30 to 35% range for a goal. I'm keeping in mind that I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm term limited. So, I mean, while we can make projections and recommendations, I mean, I'm kind of focused in the here and now while I'm still on council, because a future council could make, different decisions. But a minimum of 30, but I'd really like us to be closer to 35, but somewhere in that range.
Good, Carrie.
Yeah, I support the goal towards working towards a 30%. But I'd like us to think about the approach on how we do that, and try to figure out if we're going to make any changes with tax revenue coming in. If there's a way that we can do this over, a year or two to figure out how to not greatly impact services, not make a significant cut to services ahead of maybe a potential increase in tax revenue. I'd rather see kind of like a glide path to that goal as opposed to a drastic change.
And I
Go
would
ahead, Dan.
sort of echo that sentiment. I think particularly for the folks that are here, I think seeing the scenarios will help crystallize and give a little bit more context, because it's hard unless you've gone through at depth these scenarios to sort of understand how sensitive the reserves are, particularly over time. So I think in the agenda, when we get to the scenarios, I think it'll provide a really good context for the community to understand. So I think that's coming next on our agenda. So I think it'll be very helpful to see those scenarios.
Okay. And then John, would you like to weigh in at this point, or? Okay. So, I'm actually, I would say I'm comfortable at a 25%, but, the goal, I like the goal of I think if we choose to decide as a council that 30% is our goal, and we can sort of back up why we would like that, I'm comfortable with that. I do think then that trick is that how many of us are trying to get to that 30% for 2027, and how many are comfortable creating a gradual plan to reach that goal? So because those are two different things. So, yep. Go ahead, Julie.
The reason I think that we need to stick with 30% right away is kind of like, as an analogy, I would not want my family to go without health insurance for 2 years if I had a budget crisis and we had to figure out what to cut. I wouldn't want to go without health insurance for 2 years and say, you know, our goal is that we can afford health insurance. Hopefully nobody will have a broken leg or cancer in the next 24 months. And then we can, you know, sign back up for health insurance again. I think that's irresponsible. And I don't want to go on record of saying, well, you know, we don't need to have that much money in our savings account for the next 2 years. It can be a gradual, long-term plan because, you know, hopefully we won't have any fires in the next year or two. Well, look what's going on around the state. There's fires everywhere. So I think we need to take responsibility to our residents to have sufficient emergency money right away and not say, well, that's my long-term goal is to get responsible. I want us to have sufficient emergency money now. And even if that means making certain cuts, obviously the cuts we make would be a lot more drastic if there's no tax increase in the amusement tax. So there are two different budget scenarios depending on the outcome of that potential ballot measure. But nonetheless, if we need emergency, I mean, even just fixing Lover's Lane when the wall by the creek, you know, crashed in, and we had to spend all this money just on that one little thing. We've got such aging infrastructure. So I'm not comfortable being a little more, spending a little more money now and just sort of eventually getting responsible. I want us to be responsible right away. And to
Okay.
me, that's 30%.
And I think, and just to play devil's advocate to that, obviously, maintenance and not building up deferred maintenance over time would create a crisis. So I think that's the piece too, is that you don't want to cut operating to the point where we're not taking care of our day-to-day.
Yeah, we're not
things.
talking about what to cut though.
No, but I think what
Mhm.
you're saying is you're talking about we need money in reserves for the crisis moment. And I'm saying we also need to be continuously investing in our infrastructure over time,
I
not in a
agree.
crisis way, so that we don't have a bridge collapse. We actually repair the bridge strategically.
I agree.
And so I'm just saying that there's two ways to look
Yeah.
at your insurance.
Well, except that
scenario.
I'm not suggesting that we would ever consider cutting things like infrastructure. I'm not suggesting that, I mean, if you want to get into nitty gritty.
No, I'm just saying
I
that,
don't
but your
think that we
insurance
should-
scenario.
Yeah, well, if we have a big fire, it doesn't matter if we took good care of keeping our water lines, you know, up to date and other things like that. So.
But if
there's
we
the-
don't have a fire and our water erupts, then that's. a
Right, so
problem
there's
as
the
well. So,
crisis that
yeah.
could be environmental. And then, yeah, I'm not suggesting that we cut the budget so severely that we can't fix a leaking roof or what have you. I'm talking about other more
I was
fluffy
just
things
clarifying your.
that are
insurance
subject to being cut without it causing a safety hazard for the community.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah,
You
oh,
want to go, Julie?
Well,
I'll do
Judith, you go.
we are, it sounds like council is comfortable coalescing around a 30% reserve, is what I'm hearing. And so how,
I'm not there yet.
you're not there yet? Okay, so let's, I am comfortable with a 30% reserve and making this happen for the 2027 budget. And I will tell you that I come with solutions because the only way we're going to get there is to continue to take the $1.5 million from the mobility and parking enterprise fund for at least one more year. And we are not going to get there without a combination of increasing revenue with some cuts. So, I mean, that's how we're going to get there. But I'm agree with Julie that I don't want it to be deferred. I want it to, us to show the community that we can put this together in a nice package and get it over the finish line for 2027.
Well, just to get my hands around the numbers, Nate, we're at 26% now at 3.8. 30% would be about 4.2, I believe. So that's like $400,000 that we need to
Yeah, that's correct.
find somewhere, take from somewhere. So a $400,000 difference for 2027. I'm interested in phasing that in. That to me seems like a big jump for 1 year. And I think our reserve, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm comfortable with a 3.8 and phasing in additional increases to the reserve over the next few years at a certain increment. But as we were talking before, we need to kind of strategize that out. Is that $500,000 more per year or less or more?
Okay, go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, I'll just give a context. If we don't get, if you go to 30% and you want that next year and there is no additional revenue, you're going to have to cut 1.8 million of what we currently have and use the 1.5. If we get additional revenue to build that back up, you're going to have to cut $1 million. It does include the mobility. If not, then you're going to have to cut 2.3 million and you're going to have to cut 2.5 million.
And that's assuming no increase in revenues via.
No one is including the increase if we get amusement tax or some type of tax, and the other one does not have any any additional revenue. Yeah.
Because I think if I'm doing the little simple math correctly, so the anticipated revenue, if we did have a 4.3% increase,
4.03.
then we would end up with, what is it, John? 1.1 million?
1128.
So you either add 1.1 million or not, depending on.
Right, plus, so
the
let me
outcome.
go back and I'll just give the numbers again. If there's no amusement tax and you use the 1.5 for parking, you will have to make $1.8 million in reductions to build your revenue up to 30%. If there is an amusement tax and you use the 1.5 parking, you will need to cut $1 million to build it up to 30% in 1 year.
And because it does look like, and I can't speak for everyone, but based on what they've said, Gloria, Carrie, Nate, and myself are interested in a gradual. So then we'd have to figure out what that meant. Is that a 2 to 3 year? Is that what are we looking at for that? But I do believe that it looks like there's a majority of council interested in some sort of a gradual plan to get our reserves to that 30%.
Well, and if that's the case, I would like some clarity on how low they're willing to go for now. I mean, gradual is nice, but
I know
what
it's
are we
a
looking
complex
at?
question. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's we're just beginning that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So so if we were going to look at something like that, if we were going to look at do we want to say 3 years, a 3-year gradual?
My suggestion or proposal for council and you, Mayor, is I think it's important that we arrive at some consensus after we've discussed and walked through the scenarios, because I think without doing that, I don't think we'll have the kind of decision support that we need. I'm also extra sensitive to the people that are here in the public, in the community, so they can actually see the information. And so when we talk about what a glide path may look like, Denise and Nate have put together some of those scenarios that are in the packet. So I think the sooner we can talk about them and maybe present them on the screen. I don't know if you are prepared to do that today. I think it'll be very helpful. But directionally, with the information that I've seen in the packet with the scenarios, I do think it's possible to be prudent with an incremental approach, but I think it'd be helpful if folks could see it.
Okay, so for the purposes of this initial conversation about reserves, are we comfortable with sort of moving on to the next item with the understanding that at this moment, it appears as though council's comfortable with a 30% goal, and at this point, a gradual move to that number. Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, I just want to mention, if you do these reductions, then you don't need that much more in reserves because your 30% changes, right? If your expenses go from 12 million to 11 million, now your reserves need to change if it's at 30%.
Mhm.
So I don't have those numbers. I can figure them out real quick, but if we do these reductions immediately, then your reserves, if you want at 30%, will change also.
Yep.
So that is formulas that we'll need to look at.
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, before we go further, one thing that hasn't been identified as a separate line item, like in terms of going around the room, is whether a majority of us or all of us are comfortable continuing to take $1.5 million out of the parking enterprise and sticking that into the general reserves to use for other expenses such as streets and so forth. Because if we're comfortable, I think, doing that for 2027, and deferring other things, capital projects in particular for parking, improvements to the Dillon necessary to at least get the buses to be able to go in there so that they're not hanging out all day on El Paso Boulevard, driving the residents crazy and so forth. If we're willing to
I think
take
that's what
that,
Nate had suggested,
Yeah, if
was
we're
that we
willing to
move on to the
take that money
parking and
out,
mobility. Mhm.
then it's a little easier for us. I mean, that's just one issue we can resolve maybe pretty quickly before we get into other percentage discussions.
Sure. So are we ready for the next item then? Oh, John? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Do you have your hand up? Oh, okay.
So we're moving on the discussion with the given that 1.5 million will be transferred from.
That's going to be the next item for
Okay.
discussion. So what I'm saying is,
Isn't
are
that
we
what you were saying?
comfortable with sort of that placeholder of that 30% gradual for that, and then moving on then to the parking and mobility next? That's what I'm ready for that.
I'm not comfortable with it because I think what we need to do is not just talk about at some point in life, wouldn't we like to get to 30%? We have to come up with a 2027 budget soon. And I want to know what this council's thoughts are about how low will we go for 27 before we move on? I mean, whether we want to get to 30% by the end of 27 or the end of 28 or 10 years from now, we have to put together a budget soon. And we need to hopefully next month get into some nitty gritty discussions on how are we going to get there? What cuts, if any, will we make? Or how are we going to accomplish that goal? So I want to know what people's thoughts are. And I understand Nate's point of view that it's somewhat of a chicken and the egg situation where he feels he can't come up with a percentage number until he knows how might that impact our services that we provide. But for the rest of us who don't necessarily, because that's, so then you're in a chicken and the egg thing. You're never
Julie,
gonna.
Counselor,
all gonna
Counselor,
build on each other.
I
It's-
just want
it's
to
fine.
clarify. The spirit of today's discussion was to provide the framework through these scenarios that you were very supportive of, and John helped and provide information, and Nate came back with these scenarios to help provide a foundation for us to look through these different scenarios. So we understand, yeah, and so that was the spirit of this discussion, but I'm in firm agreement with you as part of the true north being how and when we stop using reserves, that we're going to need some of the how part of it, sort of the detail between what cuts or what revenue. But I just want to make sure that the governing body is, the spirit of today was to work through those scenarios. So the community and us all had a baseline from which to make the decision. So.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that.
So it sounds like we're comfortable moving on to talking about the Mobility and Parking Enterprise Fund. And Denise, I guess just for historical knowledge, for how many years have we been doing that transfer? Is it 3 years?
No, we just started that transfer this year.
Just this
This
year?
is the first year
This
we've
is the
done
first
that
year we did the
transfer.
1.5?
Yes, 1.5.
And so, so we are now looking at whether or not to do that again for next year.
Correct.
And so this could be a quick discussion or not. And so I don't know if anyone would like to sort of weigh in if they have an idea of how they feel about this. Go ahead, Karen.
I'm comfortable doing it again this year for and planning for 2027 for 1.5 million.
Okay.
I think we're going to have to. I mean, I mean, I'd love to, that we could have a discussion, but I don't think there is a discussion to be had because if we are moving toward a gradual increase to 30%, we have to do this. And I just wanted to go on record while got the microphone is I'm okay with the moving toward a 30%, but I'm not willing to rubber stamp it until I see those, a plan and that we're moving there quickly and not, slowly.
Excellent. Okay. I am also in favor of making that transfer for next year. Okay. Nate, thumbs up. Gloria? Yep. John? Yep. Okay. All right, good. Okay, so that one was a little, I think, easier to manage. Which is excellent. So let me get to our, okay, so the next piece is really when we start sort of looking at, so we've got that sort of idea of reserves, but obviously it's an ongoing conversation, but we have kind of an idea of where council is. And then obviously parking and mobility, strong support for that. So next would be to go over the scenarios and again, the budget implications and survey results. So that's sort of,
Do you want to talk about the survey results real quick first?
yep, I think that's
And
good.
then if we could just take a quick break and we'll get everything set up for the scenarios then.
Perfect. We to discuss.
Oh, the surveys. I'm sorry. I was just, I was deferring to you for the surveys. Yes. So, yeah.
Okay,
Thank-
so we did, so last year, I felt heard loud and clear from the community that there were questions about, our budget and questions about, just really getting the community involved in the conversation regarding, the city's budget. And so we did, again, a survey in May of this year. And then we worked with Barrick and did some in-person, community engagement regarding the budget. And, I guess there's different ways to analyze any information that we get, but for me, there were a few things that were really clear. I think that the community said, one, we need to make cuts, but two, we actually have to look at future income streams as well, that we could not cut our way out of this. And also strong support to reduce our legal fees, which we've also done. And so those were sort of the clear things that came through that. I also felt like the community said thank you for bringing us in on this and that there seemed to be a better understanding citywide of the situation. Would anyone like to expand on my little quick analysis of the survey? All good? Okay. Okay. All right. With that, let's take a quick, just 10-minute break? Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, let's gather up, everybody. Yeah, come on, John. Oh, Julie's in the bathroom. Let's put that, make sure everyone knows Julie's in the bathroom. It does. Yeah. Actually, we should have had a concert in the water tank. Oh my God. Next time in 60 years, we'll. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You don't want, yeah. Anyway. Okay. All right. Here we go. So, we're doing a great job getting through things today. So this is the moment where we look at scenarios, correct?
Mhm.
And, if you want to kind of outline what you
Yep.
created here
Yep.
and.
So I'll talk about this briefly and outline the different scenarios. I did send you the spreadsheet yesterday. We also have a very fancy interactive tool that we're just not quite ready to present yet. There were a couple of things I didn't have time to verify yesterday, but this does the job, I believe. So you've talked about 4 scenarios that you wanted to discuss, and scenario 1 is no amusement tax and no reductions. You bet. Let me, yep. Here we go. There you go, right there. Okay, so, so the first one is no amusement tax and no reductions. So if we end up with reserves at 3.8, I will tell you, I always anticipate right now for us to be a little bit higher than that, but that's where we are. Revenue at 10.8 and parking and mobility transfer of 1.5. It gives total revenue of 12.3. I do need to mention in that revenue is about $800,000 that we collect in fees. So if you change the fee schedule, you reduce things. If you reduce anything that will impact this, or you have to increase other things. So we'll be bringing the fee schedule to you, but I just want to make sure that you understand that part of that is our fee schedule also that comes for that total revenue. Expenses, this is a very flat budget, so we stay with only, and if you, the assumption that we made is that you do a 1.5% increase year over year, both in revenue and expenses. That's an assumption. You can change those assumptions, but it gives us some type of assumption to go with. It's a 12.8. Capital right now, we're doing 1.4 million. And that goes into capital. Now, we only have about 500,000 that has to go into capital due to current debt. So the rest of it is capital that we're including, and that's also part of your reserves. We have a little bit in capital every year. a couple years ago, we did transfer about 500,000 out of capital to help balance the budget. Those are part of your reserves also that we haven't really counted as reserves, but in case of a rainy day or something happens or we have a bridge and we need a little bit additional funding, we have that in capital. So that's been built up over the year. I think we have a little over 4 million right now in reserves. However, most of that is already allocated for projects that you have approved or that we have grant funding for. So there's that. You bet.
I'm assuming I know the answer, but I just want to make sure, since we were just recently approved expenditures for the wildfire mitigation fund, that we would allow certain equipment to get purchased
Mhm.
to help with the tree cutting and all, and new siren system in town. Uh, uh, Is it fair to assume that that's not part of the 500,000 that you said is already committed under capital, because that would be paid from a separate fund?
Right. This year that is paid from a different fund. In the
Okay.
future, that will be part of your capital. We'll just make it part that you want this amount for
Okay, I
capital,
just
but
wanted-
that is the different fund. You got a memo about that yesterday of exactly what they've expended, what they're looking for, et cetera. So yeah, that's the different allocation
And
fund.
can you just very briefly let everyone know what's the 500,000 of the capital that's already been committed?
It's for all the lease purchases that you have, our debt service.
Vehicles and such?
Yes.
Thank you.
Don't we have to keep a certain amount in that fund for when we get, have to match grants? If we have a match that
Yeah, and
we have
that's
to have a
what,
certain.
yep, that's part of that 4.6 million that we have right now in that
Okay.
fund. It's allocated for all the grant matching that we have said that we will accept the grant based on this matching.
Okay, thank you.
And then I know next year we're looking at maybe just a couple really key capital projects, Lovers Lane and Ruxton.
We have a couple of projects that we have Lovers Lane, we have Ruxton, we have a paving project. We have been, what are the other ones? Lovers Lane is the biggest one. Ruxton is also a very big one. We have paving. You have a few others I know that that are being discussed.
Yeah, we also have the Serpentine Phase 1 bridge repair that we're looking for 2027, as well as the design of the access improvements in front of the Dillon that we need to get done. We also have some stormwater work around that would be linked to the CDBG grant for Duclos in front of the height or the elementary school right there. And then, yes, the paving projects that Denise mentioned, there's actually probably 4 roads projected right now to do.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question, Ben, on the Dillon project. Are we breaking that phase 2 into smaller phases so that we can just get a driveway for the buses to idle there? Because I know there's a larger phase 2 includes a courtyard area, but is there funding in this current budget just for that, or is that currently not funded?
No, that's currently not funded for the Phase 2 of the Dillon, like the on-site work of Dillon. So there's some nuance in this whole Dillon project. So what we have is CDOT has given us a temporary access permit extension for the Phase 1 work that we did at Dillon. That allows us, because there were a number of different accesses that didn't really meet any compliance there, we were allowed to extend and keep the use that we're doing right now, as long as we said we're going to fix this access improvement in the future. So what that really ties in is to all the Manitou Avenue related access improvements. So that's really talking about how we fix that bidirectional turn lane in front of the gas station and the old putt-putt golf course and all of that area. That's what that money can be used for there. But to be intelligent with that, we wanted to talk about how do we link that into the engineering effort for Phase 2 of the final Dillon project and link that into that access improvement for the bus routes there. But that CDOT money can only be used for the Manitou Avenue portion of that and not any of the on-site work, if that makes sense.
What's the deadline? Well, you said we got an extension of time to break the law and how to do it right. You know, what Is there a deadline where they say if you don't get it done by X date, we don't even want you pulling over there, it's too dangerous and we're tired of it?
Well, the funds would be available for actual improvements in around 2029 for the CDOT portion there. But as long as we're showing progress towards the engineering effort there that's meeting all the compliance in 2027, 2028, then they have implied that they would give us an additional extension for that.
So we need 2 years worth of engineering evaluation before we do anything?
No, we would only need 1 year there, but the challenge is that the funds don't become available till 2029, the way that they were allocated in the tip.
So basically they want, if we were to get it done before 29, then we're fronting the money and they're reimbursing us in 29? Denise is saying no.
No, we can't have that advanced allocation there. It's got to be targeted because basically those funds are all the partner agencies around here, El Paso County, Colorado Springs, we all have projects that have to be defined in certain years. So we're essentially creating shovel-ready plans to do all the engineering, go through that so that we can have that target start date to do that work
I
in
see.
2020.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions for Ben while we've got him? Okay, excellent. All right. I know.
Yeah.
Thank you, though.
So I'll go through this. If then the total expenses is 14.2, which gives you a deficit of 1.9. If you don't do any reductions, you end up with reserves of 1.9, and then it shows the 2028 and 2029. So it follows through with that of where we end up. That's the scenario one.
And can I make a quick comment? Just to circle back, I'll make a couple comments. One, first, thank you for this analysis. Two, I think there's just on this scenario, the baseline scenario, there's a lot of education here, I think, for the community and the people that we represent. Because I think if you went around the campfire and talked to most people, they wouldn't sort of understand this with clarity. So this is extremely helpful. My other comment would be it takes pressure to create a diamond. So just a few minutes ago, we talked about directionally that in row number 14, our directional consensus is to maybe work up the fund balance reserve ratio to 30%. So where we are today, baseline with no additional taxes and no reductions, your net income is that you have a structural deficit of about $2 million that this projects out. Our reserves would run out in this baseline scenario in 2028. And why that's important for all of us is that it's a little bit different from our household, right? If we run out, we can go take a line of credit or put a little more on the credit card. Municipal finance doesn't work like that, right? So that's why this meeting is so important, is that we are decisioning and solutioning on how to solve that issue. So I appreciate you baselining this so our community can understand the level of operational challenge that we're facing, because this brings perfect clarity to it. So thank you.
Well, this is 27, 28, and 29. So it gives you 3 years.
Okay, are we ready for the next scenario? Okay.
Okay, scenario 2 is no amusement tax and reductions, and I just put some numbers in based on what you just said of a 30%. Let me see if I don't think I can make a change right now on this. Let me check so that you can see the entire scenario. No, it's not. So you see, this is no amusement tax and no reduction. Let me make it just a touch smaller. Oh, it's moving. I had it right here. There we go. Okay. I can make it a little bit bigger again. So this will give you that information. So again, we begin with the same reserves. And the revenue, the parking and the total revenue stays the same. Expenditures stays, capital stays. And then here, this line right here is the one that we can work with to say, what do you want for reductions? If you want 30%, we have to do a $1.8 million in reduction. If you do that slower, that's what I need from you is, are you saying we went 30% by 2029, 28, or 27? Because then we'll go work on our reductions and bring that back to you accordingly. But that gives you kind of a sense of a $1.8 million in reduction in order to make your 30%. So your total expenses after the reductions would be 12.4. And then your ending balance, ending reserves would be 3.7 because again, as I mentioned previously, your fund balance depends on your total expenditures. So you need less of a fund balance if you bring down your expenditures. And then it shows in 2028, we would have to do a $2 million reduction. And in 2029, we would have to do another $2 million reduction as we go over or continue that. So that just shows you where we are as we go forward with that.
Denise, are fees in revenue?
Fees is in revenue. So again, I will bring that up. We have about $800,000 in fees that we get per year for all, and that includes pool, every fee that we charge. That includes that, not parking, but all the other fees that we charge in the general fund. You change any of those fees and that changes your revenue.
Can you remind me when the fee schedule's on the agenda?
I think it's in I will look at break so I can give you.
I
the
know it's in
exact date.
September. I just don't
Yeah,
know the
it's in
exact date.
September. Yeah.
And additionally, when are we talking about the parking?
That's in also September if our consultant can get all the numbers together.
Cool. Okay. And Julie, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I just need you to remind me, because there's no reference on the chart. Do I understand that you've increased expenses each year by,
1.5%.
okay, and then you haven't increased the revenue, or increased?
We increase revenue by
the same
1.5.
amount?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it balances out. Okay, thank you.
And, Mayor. And in the spirit of learning together and educating our community, just to go back a few minutes ago when we were talking about, and there was consensus to approve the 1.5 million parking and mobility transfer. If Denise or Super Nate were to zero that out and not do the transfer, the reductions would be even more significant. And so that's where, when you see this, the sensitivity comes to light, in terms of the scale and the magnitude of it. So I'm glad that we agreed, at least for the foreseeable future, to continue that 1.5 million. You take that out and then you've got some pretty significant challenges. So thank you.
Question. So is it fair to assume, because we haven't really gone over it, but that if we continue to take $1.5 million out of the parking fund, what, if anything, what problems does that create? I mean, I assume that means there's less money left over for normal things that the community wants, like fixing their roads. Does it impact our ability to get to our matching funds amount that we need in order to complete the Dillon? Or is there any long-term serious consequences that may result? I know the answer in part depends on what happens with parking income, fees in that fund. But generally speaking, is it fair to assume that it's no big deal if we keep stealing that money and using it for other things?
I don't think the word stealing it's
transfer.
It's a word
Sorry.
of transfer.
Transfer.
And what you choose is fixing the Dillon more important than keeping streets going? I mean, that's the choices that you're having to make right now. I think the Dillon is working very well. We're making, we've got the bathrooms, we got everything there. But if you choose not to do, right now, I think we're going to end up with our reserves a little bit higher this year if everything comes in as anticipated. So we'll continue to build those reserves a little, but not as much, unless if you're planning to purchase a big piece of property like you did with the Dillon. You know, the Dillon right now is probably 4 million to 5 million to get that parking lot completed. And I don't see that you're going to be doing that in any time in the foreseeable future until we can get this more balanced. Otherwise, you're going to be saying, okay, let's have a nice Dillon and a beautiful parking lot and that does everything that we need it to do, but let's not have streets taken care of.
So the $4 to $5 million more money that we need to spend on the Dillon, how much of that would be coming from grants and the monies that we just heard about coming in 2020? How much of that is our own money that we need?
That will be our money
Our
until we can get probably into the next PPRTA cycle. Then we could use some PPRTA, but that will be a while out.
So do I understand then that what you're saying is we need the reserves for the parking enterprise to get up to between $4 and $5 million by 2029 in order to get the CSU money?
No, the 2029 is CDOT money, and that's to work on the Manitou Avenue aspect and the access.
So how much do we need?
We don't need anything by 2029 at this point.
Okay, so the reserves and the parking enterprise are just fine, even if we continue to take 1.5 million and transfer it?
Right now, it looks like it's that, and our consultant who's doing all this studying for us will be able to give us more details once we get that information.
Denise,
Thank
can I ask a quick, I should know the answer to this, but I don't off the top of my head. Does our cost share for the Mountain Metro number 3 and number 33 shuttles come out of the mobility and parking?
Number 3 comes out of it. Number 33 comes out of Bar Trail. I made that change this year. So Bar Trail we can use, it's very specific what we can use Bar Trail funds for. And one of them is the shuttle access, which is $200,000. I'm also working on some negotiations to see if we can get both of those down, but I'm working that right now. That's going to take several months to work on that. But the 50,000 for 3 comes out of the mobility. The 200 and some thousand for 33 comes out of Bar Trail parking lot.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for scenario 2? All right.
So scenario number 3 is if we get the 4.03 amusement tax, if you so choose to approve the resolution on Tuesday, and there are no reductions. So that begins, we go through the exact same scenario, 3.89 or 3.8 in reserves, revenue of 10.8, mobility and parking of 1.5, amusement tax of 1.1 additional revenue. So that gives 13.4 million approximately in total revenue. Expenditures of 12.8 or 12.8 approximately, capital 1.4, total expenses 14.2. You go into a deficit of only 799, so your reserves goes to about 3 million. If you did absolutely no changes, that gives about a 21% in your reserves. And then over 28 and 29, if there is no additional reductions or no additional revenue, you see that your reserves go down 16 and then 12% accordingly.
Can I ask a question? This may be a dumb question, but I'm not very good at charts. Even though it says no reductions, it looks like, is that $800,000 of reductions under 2027? Under surplus deficit?
No, that's the difference between the total expenses on line 39 and the total revenue on line 35. That's
So
your-
they're taking it from reserves. So they're taking it from reserves in that scenario. So if you look at the reserve amount at the top, it's reduced.
The expenses are 799,000 more than the revenues. So you're pulling that from reserves.
I see. So if we make no changes, but the tax passes, we'll have to take 800 grand out
That's
of the
exactly- yeah.
reserves. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sometimes charts get my brain mixed up. All right.
We're all good? Okay, all right.
Okay, and the last scenario is 3.8, revenue 10, go same thing. Expenses are the same. Here's where if you want to make reductions and you want to build your reserves, where do you need to do to make that happen? So if you wanted a 30%, and these are the ones that you can fill in right here, the yellow. If you wanted a 30%, we'd have to do $1 million reduction. That way you put 200,000 into your reserves and you build your reserves to that 30%. If you and again, this is the direction I need. Do you want to say, hey, we want our reserves next year to be at 27%? Give us those two scenarios of what that would look like. Then I can bring back for you a budget accordingly. But this shows you what would need to happen with your 30% that you requested earlier.
And then again, right now, we're at 26%. So if we were to, at the end of 26, so if we were to say 26% for 2027, 28% for 2028, and then 30% for 2029, I'm guessing would be,
If I say, yeah, I just did it. So if I did 800,000, it would give you 29%.
so
If
do
I
20, yeah, if you can do,
700,000.
Yeah.
You get 28%. If I did 600,000, you get 27%.
okay. So if we did, and then for the next year, looking at like a 28.
And that's with the 1.4. So we'd have to look at it. If you said you wanted 28% this year,
Or no, I was thinking we leave it the same, like for 2027 would be 26, which is where we are for 2028. It's fine. We're just playing around anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just playing. But
So-
if I get direction of what you want each year, then I will bring that to you
Mhm.
and say, you want to do this gradual, you want to do 27, 28, and then 29 by 2029. We would then do that accordingly.
And that's with capital at 1.4. I
Yeah.
think Denise just mentioned that, but obviously that could be a discussion that we could reduce that as well, but.
I don't know if capital reducing would be scary because one, we don't have enough people to do very many more projects. We only can do the projects that we have in place right now. You have reserves. You're building your reserves for emergency. Why are you building two reserves? You build one or you build the other. So I believe that we can reduce some capital. Those are things that we'll be bringing to you, what we can and what we should. I'll be bringing analysis accordingly with that. But I think that that's an opportunity maybe because I don't have enough staff to take on any more capital. We can't do the capital that we've done over the last 5 years unless if you give me additional staff. And then that's going to be here. And if we say we're going to contract it out, I need staff to manage contractors. So you can't just say, take this project and we're going to contract it out and go with it. I need staff to be out there managing the contractors, still doing everything, even and quantifying, doing all the things to make sure our invoicing is correct. I want to give, I will make that statement here. I got to give Ben a big shout out because every invoice is absolutely detailed and we've made substantial savings due to his details and due to him catching every little error. And that takes time and energy. That isn't something you do in 5 minutes.
For clarification though, don't we sometimes, if I recall correctly, have part of the project include a project manager, not necessarily someone on salary as a staff person here?
even with a project manager, you need staff to manage that. I'm not going to have a project manager oversee invoices. I'm going to make sure Ben oversees every single invoice that happens in quantification. So you may have a project manager that's out there doing part of the project, but when there's an issue, the project manager doesn't manage it. It's staff that manages it.
Okay, because we didn't have any staff managing the Waltham Avenue project. That was just.
That was not our project. That was Colorado Springs Utilities project.
And do you anticipate having our own staff be paid to manage or oversee, I guess would be the right word, the Ruxton project?
Yes, that's part of our project, but that's why I'm saying I can't take on any more projects. The Ruxton project is going to be very intense. It's going to be every day, and that's for the next 2 years.
And for the Ruxton project, is that, none of that money comes from capital, correct?
Correct. That is not ours. That is CSU's.
For Ruxton?
For Ruxton, yeah, we do have a little bit of a match and we're using that match. I've saved up for the match. We've also been able to use the Bar Trail funding to be part of that match. So as you've seen over the years, we've put money in for that Ruxton project. I do want to mention, due to Ben's excellent skills in negotiations, we just received an additional $1 million from CDOT because this project is continuing to go up. The longer we delay this project, the more it's going to cost. And we're already anticipating some additional funds that we're going to need, which I'm looking at the Ruxton project or the Bar Trail funds to use it. I do want to mention, as with every budget, you look at every single line item, you look at every single source of revenue, and my job is to figure out where I can find the funding to make projects work. And for that, right now, I'm looking at the Bar Trail parking lot fees to help with that project.
But just for clarification, the city of Manitou Springs isn't the entity that was holding this project up. I just want that on the record. I mean, we weren't the ones.
Yeah,
So-
it was a lot of, we first started with a design that was only Upper Ruxton. And I said, no, that isn't where we want to go. And that was part of what we first started with, and I said, no. So there was a little bit of everything that happened there. We got to the right spot, as we always do, but it took us some time. But yes, you're right. There was some definite hold up from other entities.
And none of the matching funds that you were referring to on the upcoming Ruxton project would be coming from general reserves, correct?
No, they would not.
Okay.
Not at this point, as long as we can use all of the Bar Trail funds, which is where I'm trying to pull the funding from.
And if you can't pull all the funding from Bar Trail, then the remaining matching funds we would need to complete the Ruxton project would come out of the parking and mobility enterprise and not from the general fund.
We
Is
would
that correct?
probably have to look at both. So, but right now I'm very comfortable, and I will put that on the record. I'm very comfortable that we have the funding that we need through the bar parking lot and others, unless if prices go up 100% or some other things happen. But that's where I'm at right now.
Oh, sorry. Quick one, you can move funds out of Bar Trail at your discretion?
As long as it meets only certain specifications per the CSU contract.
Okay, thank you.
Do you feel comfortable sharing your view? I mean, with your seasoned expertise and experience running the city, in terms of what you think or would be comfortable with from a reserve ratio perspective for 27, or just general from a policy level?
Well, we've talked about it. I will say I would not be comfortable going anywhere below 3 million. I think once you get to the 4, 5, 6 million, I think then you have to answer to residents whenever they're saying, I need a pothole filled, and we say, I can't do it. When you say the parks are not in good shape, and I say, I don't have the money, right? So there's always this tug and pull of where do we go? And you always do a risk analysis. We are putting money into fire mitigation to help if there's a fire, right? But at the end of the day, no matter, as as Chief says over there, we will be safer, but we're never safe. We're an urban interface, and there's always things that happen with that. I'm not anticipating any flood unless if there's a fire. So you do a risk analysis of where we are. I will also say, and Natalie made a very good point, when I came on, there was a huge backlog of maintenance. Due to the maintenance that we've done, we've had less crisis. If you do not do your maintenance and you do not keep up, then your chances of risk goes way up. And then you do need more in capital. As long as we can keep maintenance going, we can keep sewer lines clean, we can keep storm drains done, we can keep streets at a good place, we can keep parks at a good place, then you don't need as much reserves because you've taken care of those things that could cause issues and could cause the crisis.
And what percentage is the 3 million? What would that be for our percentage of annual expenses? I unfortunately left my phone in the car, so I can't.
It would be just over 20%.
20 point.
It would just, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing I do want to mention, and this is another one, risk factor that you guys have to think about. If you have a lot in reserves, I am not going to get grants. It's just not going to happen because it happened with me with DOLA, right? You have enough in reserves. Why do you need this? So you have to, you can shoot yourself in the foot, so to speak, if you build your reserves up too high. Because anytime I go for grants or I go to someone and say, we need some additional funding, I'm at a place, they're going to look and they're going to look at our audit and say, you don't need it. You have plenty of money compared to all the other cities in Colorado that is needing that.
Denise, can you give me a ballpark of, I know that the insurance rates that we pay to insure everything that we need to insure in the city have gone up exponentially. Do you kind of build that in, that knowledge that is going to be something that's going to be a continual issue? Because they just from 25 to 26, I mean, they really jumped. So could you address that?
Yeah. And that's why another thing about reserves and how to keep things going, they jumped because we had some major issues, right? This year, right now, we're dropped tremendously in all of our claims, tremendously due to sewer being taken care of, due to stormwater. So if you don't take care of those, your insurance is going to go up, and they look over 3 years. I'm anticipating this year for it to drop. I won't get that number until September, October, but we have done phenomenal in both our workman's comp claims and our property and casualty. So if we can keep that down, then you see that drop. If you do less and you cut this budget too much, you're going to see that go up because I'm going to have more and more claims that I can't manage. So there's this tug here with everything. You've got to find this sweet spot of what it is. And those are the things, because we did go up 62%. We had some very high claims. This year, we've had hardly any.
Well, and it depends on where the cuts come from. The cuts don't necessarily have to come from maintaining the integrity of the city's roads and so forth. They can cut from other sources. So it's not a fait accompli that if there are cuts that it's going to reduce our ability to keep up with all the good things that you've established.
Yeah, and that's an interesting conversation also, because if you cut, let me think, you cut city clerk. I'm looking at Elena, so I'm just said that. If you cut city clerk, let's say, and now our judge can't, or the judge has issues with that. So now we have other issues because we don't have enough staff to do all the dockets. We don't have enough staff to do this. We're not getting our core request done in time. We're not doing our recordings. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. That becomes a thing. You cut planning. Now we have a backlog in all of our permitting that they work on to get those things done. You have a backlog in all of our signage. You have a backlog in Ben doing his work because planning has to go through everything that we do. We can't just say, let's go do it. You cut you cut the
depends what
pool,
you
you
cut.
have other things, but
Yeah.
we're a will, and any spoke you impact, it impacts somebody else.
Yeah, there's different levers. So I appreciate you sharing your viewpoint. So you'd be comfortable, you're saying, given your operational experience and intuition at 3 million, you'd be comfortable at say at 3 million. So I think for us as the governing body, perhaps the policy guideline approach is maybe a range. We consider a range, so it's not a hard target of 25% or 30%, but maybe we could find comfort with a range of, let's say, 20 to 30%. So that's my takeaway when I hear Denise's valuable perspective too, as we think about this.
And Denise, do you have a sweet spot in terms of reserves? You mentioned that if they're too high, funding, granting organizations may say, hey, take that out of your reserves. Other communities need the money.
As I mentioned, I'm at 3.2. That to me is my sweet spot.
Really.
But, because that gives you enough, if something happens, to allow us to move. And if there was an emergency, I do want to mention, we have a fire, whatever that may be. Immediately we go into, that we have declared an emergency and we hand it over to the county. So remember, with emergencies, once we hand it over to the county, now they're responsible and have to do certain financials, and we don't have to. Then you have a declaration of emergency by the state. So funding comes with that. So there is all these complexities. It's not that there's an emergency and all of a sudden you have to pay for everything. That never happens. It could. I'm not saying it won't, right? But I think the risk of that is pretty low. There is always some funding that comes with emergencies that you are working with and you're trying to find it. You have an emergency, now you go to the government and you say, I want certain amount allocated, and senators can help you get that. So it's allocated for there. So there is lots of different perspectives or different things that happen when an emergency occurs. It's not all of a sudden we have to have all this money immediately. That never occurs.
I think we need to be mindful, though, that the state of Colorado is facing a $1.2 billion budget shortfall statewide. And we have already seen in real time this administration hold FEMA funding, especially to blue states. So I'm not willing to say, hey, if a disaster strikes, the cavalry is going to come. I think that's one of the reasons why I think we need to be very much more mindful of, to me, I get a little uncomfortable hearing 3.2 million and 20%. We cannot, those aren't guarantees.
Yeah, and you're right. There's no guarantees in any budget or anything that we do. It's just that risk factor. Where is the risk factor? Next year the state could be very different if it passes one tax or if it does something else in a new governor, et cetera. So there is no guarantees. You're right.
Yeah, and I think also, if we're going to have to rebuild our community, our reserves aren't going to do that. So I think that, like you said, we have to do all the balancing of quality of life and all those different pieces that all work together, because I certainly enjoy the walkability in our parks and the quality of life I currently have as well. So, okay. And I did just want to ask one clarifying question. We were talking about the Ruxton project, and I just think that it'd be great to take a moment to explain that there is a Ruxton project that is going to happen this year that is not our project.
Yeah, I'll let Ben, and you're
I just
going to get
wanna-
an update on Tuesday.
Yeah.
With that, CSU will be here, but I'll let Ben just talk.
I just want to clarify just so that it's
Yep,
not a surprise.
thank you.
Yeah, so as Denise mentioned, CSU will be introducing the project on Tuesday quickly. They will also do a little more formal presentation in September, and then have an engaged work session with folks to come attend, just similar to the way they did with Waltham. But basically, this project is for what's called cathodic protection to protect the existing pipeline that's in Ruxton. It's a far less intrusive method of maintaining the pipeline. Basically, they go through and drill around 200 test holes, install anode bags, and that helps protect the integrity of the pipe. But it's a rolling operation where they move through, they put the hole in the ground, they put the anode bag, and then they restore all in the same day. So they can move through and kind of jump around the project once they get feedback from the community there. So that will happen looking like starting in September, right after the ascent and the marathon. And then that will look to go into around the November timeframe. So you'll see folks moving through there, but it's a far less impactful project than our Ruxton project.
And you will not be the project manager because that is a CSU project.
I will not be the project manager. Yes.
And the more major Ruxton project is anticipated when?
We're projected to start in mid-August. We're still getting all the details figured out, and then to go into that November timeframe in 2027. So next year.
Starting in August of 27.
Correct.
Okay, because we're asked that frequently by people, and I'm never really sure if there's any definitive answer, but it looks like it's August of next year.
Yeah, right now we're very heavily engaged. I spent a lot of time every week going through the utility relocation part because it's actually not the sidewalk and the roads. It's the utility relocation component that's very complex for this. So we're in right away and environmental phase, but we have to get all our utility ducks in the row to make sure that they can work at the same time that we're working on the project to have less impact. In typical large construction projects, utilities relocate first, well ahead of the project, and then that project for all the heavy civil construction comes in afterwards, but we have to do this at the same time, which takes a tremendous amount of coordination effort. We're trying to set all the utility providers and the community communication providers up for success with the joint trench efforts. It's a very complex puzzle, but that's what we're doing right now. So there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes ahead of that project. Portions of, well, undergrounding, there's two terms in undergrounding. There's some relocation of some utility poles and some undergrounding of some of them, but most of it is relocation work. There is some undergrounding of communication infrastructure. So the lines that hang from the bottom, that's what we have to coordinate as well to make sure we can relocate the poles. So there's some undergrounding, but it's not of electric infrastructure per se.
And just to be clear, the city doesn't have any expenses involved in this project. This is a CSU funded project.
Sorry, the one in this year,
Yeah.
that is a CSU funded project that's happening in September through November. We have no costs associated with
Okay.
any of
Will
that.
there need to be road repair after that project, or I don't know the size of these holes?
There will. They're about
And-
12-inch holes that they put in to put the cathodic protection in, and then they fill it up with soil, road base, and then a flow fill material that cures quickly. So you should be able to drive on it the next day.
So
Yes,
CSU has responsibility for that as well.
they do.
Yeah, and remember with our project, we're going to be doing the entire road, so it will be totally repaved when we do our portion of the project.
In 2027.
Yeah. And I would just mention, if people ask, that we'll be doing it in the fall of 27, because I don't want to give a tentative date right now because there's a lot of moving parts. And if you say August and then we need to delay till September because we're needing to get some additional information, or there's something that we didn't identify, whatever that may be. So I'm telling people fall of 27.
A little bit, maybe getting into the weeds, but if there's some project on Ruxton that's going to happen towards the end of the year, we need community meetings now.
Yes, and so that's when CSU will introduce it at the council meeting on Tuesday, have a follow-up introduction later in September, and then a community meeting right after that. So there's 3 levels of communication there, but the meat of the communication will be in a community engagement meeting, just like they did for Waltham in September.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So again, looking at this scenario, I think that the big thing that we're still sort of discussing is again that reserve balance and that target. And so initially our discussion was again looking at that 30%. Denise weighed in and said she's comfortable at maybe like a 21%, 22%. There's other things to consider that we didn't discuss, right? Which is, will we not qualify for grant funding if we have too much? How will taxpayers feel if there's money in reserves, but not money to work on projects that are impacting their lives at this moment? But additionally, we may lose FEMA funding. The state is also dealing with financial issues. And so do we need more information to decide where we want to go with reserves, or are we comfortable at that 30%? Like, how do we want to handle this where we are right now? Because I feel like that's the area that we haven't, I think, firmly really agreed around. Go ahead, Carrie.
Right. Yeah. I think it is interesting to, now hearing Denise's perspective, the idea of, we do get a lot of money from grants. I mean, we rely heavily on and get some big support out of grants. It's not our money, whether it's a road fix or, I hate to give up those opportunities. I like being safe. I like having a healthy reserve, but I also don't want to, because we do that, bypass grant opportunities. So what's the sweet spot, I guess? How do we determine a sweet spot in that scenario?
Or maybe we can get more information. Denise probably has experience to know at what point might we be denied a grant because we've got too much money in the savings account. Do they generally look at anything more than X percent and you can just pay for it yourself? What would be their percentage of annual expenses to determine if we are needy enough or if we're just too rich to qualify?
Right.
What does that look like?
It's a gray area. Grants are.
It's a
always
very-
little
yeah.
magic, a little.
Yeah. It's a little gray area. Some of it will depend. For instance, you saw a scenario of what other cities in Colorado, what their reserves are. If we're a lot higher than other cities, they're going to say, these other cities need it and you don't. So, like DOLA, they're going to look and say, we have 20 applications and you have the highest reserves of everybody. We're going to help the other ones because their reserves are so low. So it's really, again, I can't say, oh, if you're at 4 million, you're not going to get it. I would say 4 million, you're probably going to really struggle with some grants. But I think if you go, I will just say, I think if you go over 3.5, you're probably going to struggle some. But it's all a guesstimate right now because it really depends where every city is at and what their needs are. And every city, some cities are doing great and other cities are not.
And I'll say I went and did some other research. I pulled up different cities than you did. I pulled up like 12 other cities. And I didn't find anybody over 25%. And even these bigger Centennials at 25%, Longmont's at 20%, Lakewood's at 21%, Boulder's at 19.5%, North Glen's at 25%, Thornton's 19.4%, Westminster's 9.6%. We're going to be the highest. If we go with 30%, we're going to be the highest city out of anything I was able to find online. I guess I could get comfortable with a 3.2 million, 3.4 million. And then not cut city services. The thing that I think that would makes me more comfortable is the discussion we had about capital, and that we also have a healthy capital fund backing up our reserves. Because I do feel like it would not be in the community's best interest to cut services heavily when we look at the dual backup of both capital and reserves. And if we look at our other communities around the state.
And when grant funders are looking at us, do they look also at how much we have in capital? Or do they just look at the line item for reserves?
It will depend on the grantor, and what they're looking at. Most of them will pull your audits and they're going to look and see
Look
where
at the
you
whole
are,
picture.
which gives you a better picture, right? So, if I'm doing a water project, then they're going to look at the water audit. They're going to look at the water fund and where we are with that and the reserves. And you'd be happy to know we are rebuilding our water reserves, which is important. So that's the other thing is if we have an emergency and it impacts water, you have your water reserve. So there's so many reserves and different elements that you pull from. And that's what I'm trying to explain is there's so many different pots of money that you use for different situations. And so you manage those accordingly.
Denise, would you be willing to change 2027 to 25%? I'm just curious to see what that would do, or 25% across the board. I'm really,
Go to the.
Go- I'm really uncomfortable going under 25%, but that's with,
With cuts, with the
With
tax.
the tax, with,
cut.
So if you did 25%, it would be about a $400,000 reduction.
with a $3.4 million reserve. give or
And you
take.
would get with a 3.4 million.
And then we've still got a $400,000 deficit that we're taking out of the reserves just to get to 25%, right?
Right. And you could, or no,
Or cut.
I'm sorry, you're cutting
Right.
at 400,000. And a way to do that and to keep services pretty similar to where we are now is, this is the one that we'll probably look at, is we would cut capital by, not instead of 1.4, we would put $1 million in capital. 400,000 of that would be for our debt service, 400 to 500,000. And the rest of it would go into a reserves for capital, or if we need a piece of equipment or something like that, we would bring that to you.
And then from there, if we were to do this, right, we would be able to, again, have that gradual transition to where we want to go in terms of having the capital we want, parking and mobility where we want. But this would sort of help us be whole, but continue to offer quality service support for our community. So it is just the beginning, but it's a softer and potentially maybe.
It's softer. It also, really, in my opinion, it stabilizes the city, right? We aren't doing 10 projects, which we've been doing for the last 7 years almost. And that is hard on staff. We don't have the staff any longer to do that. So we really get to a more stable situation. We still keep our maintenance going. We still are able to do all the things, keep the parks, keep the pool. We're able to maintain. And I want to mention, this is only with some additional revenue. This is only with if there's that 4.03 or whatever additional revenue you might identify, that we can be able to keep it like this.
And,
Okay.
oh,
Okay,
Reg,
go ahead.
sure.
I've already been dominating the conversation. You go.
I guess I could get comfort again with the floor. So, and I'm thinking about this more as sort of our policy guideline with some flexibility in there. So the floor is set to 20%. And I'm saying, and I'm comfortable, and I may be outvoted here, but I'm comfortable with a 20% reserve ratio floor. And over time, maybe it's 20 to 25%. And as a city, we're comfortable operating within that range. Where the reason why I like the floor, aligning to where, the comfort level around 3 million is because the rubber really meets the road in terms of what the reductions are inside the 400K, the however much that is. And I think I think we're going to want to know that, and maybe that's the September conversation where once we get more clarity around that, it may be nice for us to know, okay, we've got a floor, but maybe we don't want to do that cut. Maybe that'll impact the community too much. So I just want to offer that as a perspective.
Go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say, even though the chart says in yellow, less reductions directed by city council, what I hear Denise saying is that she'd be comfortable transferring that 400,000 out of the capital improvement fund, because that's kind of the reserves for capital improvement, if you will. So we would reduce the reserves in capital improvement, move that money into just recharacterize it as reserves, in which case there would be no need for reductions under this scenario where the amusement tax passes. Do I understand that correctly,
Well, I
Denise?
think you have to say additional, because we have been making reductions. So I just think we just have
Okay,
to be
additional,
clear. Yeah,
whatever.
that's all.
Yeah.
But I
I
think
think
there's a
my-
difference.
My focus is, I'm just trying to, because it says reductions, and I think what Denise is saying is reductions directed by city council, or take it out of the capital improvement reserves, in which case the city would not have to make any further reductions. Is that what you're saying, Denise? For
But so what I'm
27.
saying is, if you tell me, Denise, this is what we want to end up with in 27. I'm going to bring back a budget, proposed budget. And probably that proposed budget is, let's take this out of capital. That is probably what I will do as we would meet with department heads and stuff. Or and if you say, no, we don't want that out of any capital, we want to keep that 1.4, then I'll say, okay, let me go back and look and see where other reductions will be and what that may look like. But and I saw John shake his head no. From my perspective, I believe that that is the place that you would pull it, is from the capital.
So do
But we can have those discussions of pros and cons against that.
So when it says less reductions, you're suggesting it could be reductions from the capital reserves, or it could be reductions in services or whatever, which ultimately we would have to vote on. Okay.
And if you were to take this money from capital, would you be able to let us know what activities or projects would not be undertaken? Because it seems to me we could spend $10 million in capital improvement.
We could, we need more staff.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I
that's
would
the other pieces
tell you
in
right
terms of management of things.
Yeah.
Because it takes really competent staff to.
right
manage
now,
those.
for next year, our capital are all funded right now. The Ruxton project, the Serpentine, all the projects that we just mentioned are grant funded in some way, and we already have the match funds for them. The 1.4 will need about 500,000 to hit our debt ratio. And then whether we need a vehicle or something like that, we'll need to add to this. But right now, all of our capital is funded. I'm looking at Ben to secure that, is funded through grants or through match that we have already anticipated and have saved for. Again, I will talk about the Ruxton. We have been putting money aside every single year to build up that fund for the Ruxton project. You have 200,000 this year that's coming from the Bar Trail. You had 100,000 last year from Bar Trail. We have continuing to put money. I don't do projects of that size in 1 year and say I usually have to come and need this. It takes years to build capital projects. Rarely do we get to do that just 1 year.
Carrie first and then Judith.
So just to be clear, if we take this down out to 2028, so then that in 2028, then we would be looking potentially at service cuts to meet, because capital will be expended. We'd be then looking at service cuts for 2028.
Possibly, or another revenue source. I mean, there's so many options. So I'm going to say out loud that my floor is 25. I I'm willing to go 25 on the floor here. And we're going to have that discussion later in, where we come up with the 400,000, whether we feel comfortable it coming out of the capital fund, or if we think that there are some other cuts. I do think that there are some other revenue sources. I mean, I realize when we're looking at a budget, I'm talking pocket change, but I would like to, for example, see a vacancy fee added to our fee schedule. I mean, I think there's other ways we can, other opportunities and down the road. So I'm willing for 2027 to commit to our floor being 25% and then having the discussion down the road about where that, we're going to make up that $400,000 deficit.
Okay. And Carrie's nodding. I'm comfortable with that too. Any other, this is sort of, again, I think our ideal scenario or our potential scenario we'll be voting on Tuesday is that amusement tax piece. And then sort of this, I don't think any of us think we're going to go through this and not reduce or address anything regarding next year's budget, right? So the other scenarios are no longer really at play for the moment.
We can certainly use it as a baseline, but just to postscript what Counselor Judith said is at that September meeting, I do think it's important that every revenue lever and every expense reduction lever, we have clarity around all of those. So we have it with as much clarity to know where those are going to come from. And then I think it is important, this scenario that we're showing, it does have a pretty big assumption in there with the amusement tax. And so I think we'll also need to contemplate if that doesn't pass. And that's why I think it's really important that every revenue lever that we can think of creatively needs to be thought about. So that's my take.
May I just have a follow-on comment? I really appreciate you saying that because if the if we vote for the resolution on Tuesday to go forward with a ballot initiative to raise the amusement tax and it doesn't pass, we do an immediate pivot to scenario 2. And I think we need to make sure that the community knows that. And so that's where we are. And hopefully we'll have the community behind us because I think this is a very fair thing to do to have the excise tax equal the sales tax, because as we all know, you pay one or the other, but not both. And I think that we really need to message that. But yeah, it's possible. There's a possibility. But so thank you for articulating that.
So I guess I should say moving forward, we need to maintain that scenario 2 as well as scenario 4 moving forward, because those are both very real options. Yeah.
I think we would all agree that we need to plan for 2 potential outcomes and have plan A and plan B, and then we'll see what happens. And if people in the community see plan A and plan B, they might think, oh, I don't like plan B. I better vote yes on this because I don't want to see all these additional serious cuts having to happen. So it also helps inform the electorate to know how they might be inclined to vote. But yeah, we have to plan for both possibilities because we won't know until the very last minute toward the very end of the year, whatever it is, mid to end of November, which plan we're going to be having to implement.
Okay. Let's see, Gloria here.
I just have some concern really about the reserve and our risk analysis. So just want to put that out there because we're really high risk, not only with extreme weather issues, but we survive off of tourism and we have really unpredictable economic situations. That means
Does that
I'm a
mean that
little.
you're not inclined to feel comfortable with a certain percentage, or what's the,
Oh,
as a result of that statement, where do you
I have
land?
concern about 25% being high enough in terms of our reserves,
Not high enough.
not high enough.
And what number do you feel more comfortable with?
We were talking earlier, about
We're talking about-
4.2, but is hearing Denise's comments that there's some danger in having a high reserve. I would like to keep the 3.8 for 2027. But if it comes to a time of vote, no, we can discuss that at that time.
Okay, thank you.
But
Gloria.
just a little like, that doesn't seem like enough money for, if we need additional funds to just keep things going.
Thanks. Okay. John Shada, would you like to weigh in at all?
Well, I totally disagree with taking any money out of capital. I think that we have other areas operationally that I think that we can let go of in terms of to trim back expenses. I think those capital projects are important, and the new council members have not even looked at what that is. And so before I think we consider even touching that, we need a comprehensive review as to what those capital funds have been used for in the past, so that everybody gets really educated about how important it is that we sustain that capital program going forward. And we look for other places in which to cut operationally. And
I have a quick question. How many years would you like to go back on that analysis?
10 years. 10 years. I think that's an important look at kind of what's going on. I don't believe that we have built up a huge reserve, okay, in the general fund. I want to remind the council that many of the grants that we have gotten, okay, are in our enterprise funds, in which have had almost no reserve. Okay. All right. So our water tank, that was not calibrated on the fact that our general fund, okay, was, 8 million, and stuff like that. So, I think that's an important thing too, to look at, is that. And I have not heard, and I would like evidence that we are being denied grants, okay, as a result of these things. I would like to see that evidence. Okay. I've never heard that we've been, this is the first time I've heard that we've been denied a grant because we had too much money in reserves. First time. And I will have been on council for 14 years. Okay. I've never heard that before. Okay. So I'd like to see evidence of the Colorado Department of Local Affairs denying people grants based on whether they have a reserve of 15% or 20% or 30%. Okay. Well, I'll put it this way. I'm much more of a balanced budget person. Okay. I would prefer that we have a balanced budget, that we spend no more money than what we take in. I think our reserve account is really good right now. And so I'm somewhat opposed at using that in the future. And I do think that we need to work really hard to educate this community as to what would happen, okay, if this 4.03%, if council decides to put that on the ballot, does not pass, okay? I think these scenarios, I don't think we spent enough time looking at what these scenarios are of what that does not pass, okay? I mean, we talk about incremental things, but what are those numbers, okay? Scroll back and look at some of those numbers. Those are pretty serious if that does not pass. And I think we owe it to this community to tell them what is going to happen if this does not pass. Be very specific, not just, oh, we won't get grants, or we will, or we're going to just invade the capital program. I think we need to be very specific as to what that means, okay? As opposed to, oh, we'll just have a smaller capital program. What does that mean? Okay, if you cannot articulate to the community, why do we have that money there? It has to mean something, okay, in terms of why we are funding that in that way. So I think that's the important thing, okay, in my takeaway today is that if we do not agree to be ask staff or ourselves, be very specific what's going to happen if this 4.3% does not make the ballot and does not pass. I think the voters are going to be very uninformed, okay? And we need to get that done ASAP, because I'm not so certain that if we fool around with those numbers, okay, after we put it on the ballot, that we're not going to be accused of some election issues in terms of us advocating in some way for the ballot. I have a feeling that Jeff may warn us about us being, putting our finger on the scale as far as the election goes.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is that after Tuesday, we won't be able to talk about the impact or review the capital funds from the last 10 years, because that could look like.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the fact that we are not being specific about these things, okay, all right. And then I think that so what I'm worried about is our vagueness that, oh, if this happens, oh, we'll just raid the capital fund, okay? To me, that isn't just like a discretionary pot of money. Okay, we either need to know why we're putting money in that fund, or we need to get rid of that dang fund and stop having it out there. Okay, it isn't just a nice to have fund. Okay, so I'm saying I think there's an educational thing here, and I think there's a real danger here that because we're not being very specific about the risk, okay, of increased revenue not happening, that we think that we think that we could sustain anything by just continuing business as usual. Okay. All right. With little incremental cuts. The way I see these spreadsheets, and a lot of these spreadsheets are from my modeling, I don't see how that's sustainable. And I think we need to spend some real concentrated time talking about the reality of if 4.3 does not pass, what is it? What is it specifically we're going to cut? And what is it we're going to specifically ask staff to go and cut? And what does that mean to this community?
And
Also
Counselor
be
John-
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Judy.
I was just gonna say, also be mindful when we're looking at scenario 2, that all of these scenarios, every single one of these still commit us to the 1.5 million from the Mobility and Parking Board through 2029. So if this doesn't pass, right, in other words, if this doesn't pass, that's off the table for even discussing whether we want to keep it. We have to do that as a minimum. And so I think we also, I think the community wants us to be as transparent as we humanly possibly can. And so that's why I brought up, we're going to do an immediate pivot to scenario 2. So we have to be ready, as Shada said, with good to go with specific cuts if this doesn't pass, and a plan for if it does.
And you know what? I know that people don't want to talk about politically the reality of what the service level cuts would be. But I think because we didn't do that last year, okay, we lost that election. I think that was
Denise has her hand up.
unclear. I think that was unclear to people what the risk was of us not having that revenue. Okay. And I think this time, this needs to be really clear, because number one, had we not built these reserves up, okay, this whole thing of us getting rid of possibly $100 million, okay, payout over 50 years, okay, I don't know that we could have reached that settlement. Okay. So, and 2 years ago, I don't know, as we would have known, we would have been in that position to need that money to do that. Okay? So that's why you keep healthy reserves around and why it's not a conversation down here at 16%. The other thing too is I think we need to have a policy that we are not going to go below a certain number. Okay? Let alone a goal of, oh, getting to 30%. A lot of these scenarios that are up here, okay, we just keep spinning ourselves into a hole incrementally. That doesn't make any sense to me.
All right, Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things regarding grants. I have mentioned before and the one that we just did not get the full one was the DOLA because of our reserves. I also want to mention
You know, what
DOLA.
you said
Wait, let me finish.
specifically.
Let me finish. DOLA did not give Victor any funding for their water project because they wouldn't do any water increases. Finally, when they did a water increase, then DOLA was able to give them some money. The reason we got the grants for the water tanks is because we do water increases. So they look at all of that whenever they do grants. And the last one, which is the one that we got from DOLA at 60,000, Todd called me and said, your reserves are so high, Denise. How can I justify that you need this? And I then walked through why we needed it and had to do it in the general fund because that was a general fund grant. That was not a water grant.
But we also got federal funding for that water tank.
Right. We used
Thank you, Joe
part
Biden.
of the DOLA. We used part
Right.
of our ARPA funds,
Right.
which was really important to get that. And then we also used some loans for it. So there is all these things that come with DOLA. The other thing I want to say is what I've heard from you, and I may have misunderstood, is that you want us to have two scenarios on a budget. You want to have one with no amusement tax with reductions and one with the amusement tax and what that looks like. So those are what I'm planning to do is two scenarios this year for you to look at, just like we did 4 years ago or 3 years ago with the marijuana. We're anticipating to do that. That's what I've heard from you from a reduction.
And so I think I've heard the two scenarios. I've heard a request for a policy from council around reserves, what we would like as low as we're willing to go, that sort of that baseline, a minimum and maximum. I've heard a 10-year review of capital funds and how they've been spent. I mean, we've had that request. I don't know, is that what in terms of an ask? Yeah, Denise, I don't think that's.
Yeah, we'll get it. It's going to take just a little bit of time with everything that we're doing, but we'll have to go through and see exactly what was used for a general fund.
Okay. And then I think the other part we've talked about is that parking and mobility piece of how long are we comfortable taking money from that enterprise and what does that look like? And do we want to set a goal date of when we sort of move away from that? And then additionally, do we want to talk about the things we could do if we weren't taking from that fund? I mean, I don't know how we could really do that, but
I think, I mean, then you're looking, now you're asking me to do 3 budgets.
well, I'm just asking,
Yeah.
I'm just talking out loud about sort of these areas that have come up.
Yeah.
And how we are able to, as John said, have a conversation with the community about when we look at this, I think we can all see what we're losing,
Mhm.
but maybe that's not as apparent to the rest of the community. So how do we turn this into like real things like a
Well,
pothole or?
Right.
you
So
know.
when we bring back the revised budget, it will show where the reductions are, right?
Mhm.
Or recommended, yeah. Thank you. It would show exactly what we are recommending as staff of where the reductions go, and then we'd get direction from you. Do you agree with that? Do you want something else, whatever that may be? And we would bring back more detail. I do need a little time to do this. I mean, I can't do this in 2 weeks. So you've got to give us some time as we go through and manage this. You don't pull together something like this immediately. We've been working on it. We're continuing to work on it, but I do need some time.
And so I guess, yeah, so I think Carrie and Nate, Carrie, did you have your hand up or no? No, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Nate.
Mayor, did you want to say anything additionally? I just wanted to come up high level just to set the table here. And this was, John, your motivation was accepted by council, which I thought was really, really valuable, which was this meeting was to provide the higher level directional overview with these scenarios that John really helped provide this framework. And so that's a thank you to John and then also the city that collaborated with it. And I think this provides what I would describe a foundation for our community members to understand the operational challenges in a consistent way. I mean, just looking at the first scenario, I think everyone can understand that. And then I think coming out of the last work section, this was part one. I think Counselor Julie had recommended then when it's workable for Denise and the finance team, we would have that deeper dive review with all the revenue levers, all the expense reduction levers, and then have conversations around that. And I think the target was early September, if that's workable. So I think this part one and part two will be valuable. And the policy guideline document, I think we can potentially work on that, as this process unfolds. I think the one really interesting nuance that Counselor John brought up in the policy guideline document was this idea that the discussion around the reserve ratio, the policy guideline, we should also discuss if that includes that we don't use reserves, or if there's flexibility in our range that, yes, if you're within the range, we can use the reserves, provided that they're within the range and they don't breach the floor. So I just want to thank John for raising that. He uses the term balanced budget, which essentially means not using anything from reserves. And I think what we're discussing here is, provided that we're within that range, you could still potentially use reserves. And that's just part of the policy discussion for further
I
review.
was just gonna say, because we use reserves all the time. Like they're constantly fluctuating. It's not this stagnant thing that is flat and then we add, but there's no movement. And so I don't know if that's worth a conversation as well, that
I was just advocating that if we're going to
Yeah.
have a policy guideline document, that it may be
include that.
useful
as part
to
of the
articulate it. That's all.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Gloria.
Yeah, I like the idea of a floor and a ceiling on the reserve situation. And regarding the 1.5 million transfer, it would help me to know, not so much what, I guess I would like to know what are I'm sure there's a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan for parking and mobility. So we'd know if transferring that 1.5 million is going to affect something that was planned for 2028, 2030. Thank you.
Let's see, are we good? So,
Julie was not.
okay, go ahead, Julie.
I wanted to point out, since we kind of fluctuate between talking about fund balance percentage and a dollar amount, that if we go back to one of the earlier slides, as I understand it, at the end of, this is all 2025. What is the percentage under the fund balance comparison? There's nothing about this year. So assuming that income and expenses plot along as anticipated, Nate, what percentage of our annual budget would our net year-end reserves be? Because I just want to know the dollar amount of reserves at the end of this year, assuming everything goes to plan, and what percentage is that of our annual expenses at this time?
Yeah, the end of the 2026, we're anticipated 3.83829. That's what we're projecting for our reserves to be, and that would be about
I
20.
thought that was what it said at the end of 2025 on the chart. So it's the same for 26?
I think there's like a typo on
Is
that
that a
page.
typo?
I don't-
If you look at the fund
The
balance
fund balance
comparison to Salida and Idaho Springs,
There's
It just-
25 and 24 numbers, and at the end it says Manitou Springs, basically 27%, 2025. Is that a typo?
Yeah, I think it's just a typo. It's not,
All right.
do you know what we're talking about?
27%. So when John was,
Sorry, yeah, I put
that's okay.
I put 2025 on there. It's 2026.
So I just want to point out that John Shada is suggesting, let's not keep stealing at all another penny from the reserves. Let's have that be just for true emergencies. And I would suggest as defined by that Government Best Practices Association thing. Not just because we feel like spending more, but that aligns with where Gloria was saying, she's not comfortable with 25%. So if we're currently anticipating having 27% of our annual budget in our emergency fund, then I would imagine then that means that, Gloria, you would agree that we shouldn't be taking any more money out of reserves just to pay for regular operating expenses. Do I understand you correctly? You said you wanted something more than 25. We're going to be at 27. Are you comfortable with 27 and not steal, in other words, to not take any more money out of reserves for next year?
I would say, yes, at this point, but if there were an emergency situation and
Well,
we
reserves
needed to
are
do
for
that.
emergencies,
I
so
understand.
we're not
Mhm.
talking about that.
Okay.
We're just talking about regular planned operating expenses for the year of 2027. You'd be comfortable keeping it at the current anticipated 27% of our budget being set aside in our emergency fund?
If we needed additional funds to keep operations going and dropped below 3.8, I would vote in favor of keeping the city operations going.
Okay, so
So-
you are comfortable going as low as 25%?
3.8 is my preference, but if we needed
So you're-
the funds because of some unplanned situation,
No, we're not talking about unplanned situations. We're talking about the budget that we're gonna
Well,
have to vote on soon.
yeah, I understand, but we make the budget with plans for 27 and we've been darn close. So I would say if we make the budget for 2027, whatever amount that is, then I would want to keep the 3.8. If something unusual happened, again,
Well, that's-
unplanned.
And that's why we have more than one budget meeting, because there's always a mid-year budget
So
meeting to
we amend
evaluate
the
how our
budget,
things
is that what
going.
you're saying?
But before we get to the summer of 2027, we have to, at the end of 2026, decide what 27 looks like and
Mhm.
send that to the state. So
For
for 2020, so for 2027, other than unplanned emergencies or what have you, it sounds like you and Shada are on the same page about not taking any money out of reserves because you want to continue with the
26.7.
3.8 million
Yes,
in our fund. Am I correct?
yes.
And I also want to go on record of saying I was asking questions about what Denise was looking at with the capital fund, but I am not at all in favor of, and I will use the word stealing, money from the capital fund and the reserves in the capital fund and using it for regular operating expenses. And I really support your suggestion that we get better informed and educated about what impact will it be on our community if we continue for the next 2 to 3 years to be taking $1.5 million out of the parking enterprise? I want to know, what does that do for our Dillon project? What does that do for other parking and mobility needs?
And I do think that that was on the list of things that I articulated to Denise that we'd be looking for. And I just want to specify that while I appreciate your creative use of the word stealing, the actual definition of stealing does not apply for.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Judith.
Well, okay, so I think everyone around this table already knows that I'm a real budget hawk. I think I believe that this is the most important thing that council does is to to take care of the safety, health, and welfare of our city appropriately, but also be very, very fiscally responsible. And I think, Councilor Latterman, you mentioned, oh, if something comes up, something did come up something big a $3.2 million thing came up. And remember, we dug as deep as we possibly could into our pockets and we came up with the last number before we said, see you in court, because we didn't have any more money. And that was $3.2 million to get out of that contract. And if we hadn't had a really robust and healthy reserve, we wouldn't have been able to give them a dime. So we were able to do that because of the healthy reserves we have. So we've already gone through that and experienced that. And having, you know, several of us, you know, having to govern through COVID was just another time when, you know, wow, we had to change operations like immediately. Right. So when I said you know, I'm okay with around 25%. I do so, you know, hoping that if we need to go there, I guess I'm willing to, but we need to be able to tell our community that we may need to make some cuts. And if we as a council say we're sitting on $3.8 million and we are not willing to go below that, then we have to let Denise know today that is the direction now that we're going in with having her do 2 budgets. So I just want to make sure that we give solid direction to Denise based on what we now, because now this is a new conversation. So, and I'm willing to I'm glad we're having it.
Okay. And additionally, I think there is also that piece of where we want to be in 2027 versus where we want to be in 2029. So again, if we do want to look at a 25% fund balance, at that reserve balance for 2027, but our goal is 30 and we want to get there by 2029, that is additionally a conversation. So I think those are those pieces where I think that there are some of us who are comfortable potentially looking at that 25% piece, even though it maybe isn't exactly where we want to land, but we know and have a goal of where we're going to land based on us putting together a reserve policy that we'll be working off. So I think that there are a number of moving parts here. So I don't
Some of
think
us
it's
comfortable with that.
correct. Right. I'm just saying that that there's a lot there.
That's what we're going to have to decide.
Right. So there's folks that are comfortable with 25% period. There's folks that are comfortable with 25% for next year with the goal of 30. And there's folks that would like to be at 30 immediately. Is that?
Well, and there's the folks that don't want to touch the budget at all, which apparently is currently at 27%.
Okay. So
if
then
we
there are
don't touch
4.
the reserves at all, and we use that just for emergency money, then it sounds like what we've just been told is, in spite of the typo, that's actually 27% is the 3.8 million.
Mhm. So there's
So-
4 options on the table. Okay. Well, I'm just saying that,
To put that out there, because that, when you were doing your little summary, it didn't sound like that was one of the choices.
no,
And
correct.
at least 3 and maybe even more of us are looking at not touching the reserves, keeping it right where it's at 3.8 million, i.e. 27% of our expenses. So
Okay.
that's one of the options out there.
Okay, excellent. So I think for today, if we could go around and say, are you comfortable looking at a 25% option, or would you like to look at a 27% option? Is that for today? Would that be helpful, Denise? Okay. All right. Carrie, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I'm comfortable looking at the 25% option and then also as articulated, looking at our other options for increasing revenues. If there was some way that we could reduce the impact on the community and look at other ways to increase revenue and give that process a year or two to see what we can do before we make some significant cuts, I would support that.
Excellent. I added that to the list, the long list I have for Denise.
Well, we've been having this discussion about working up to 27%. And if we're already there, we don't have to work up to 27%. We're there. So I felt this way at the beginning of the today is like, if we're already there, let's stay there. committing to the 1.5 million out of the mobility and parking board revenue. I agree. I am not comfortable at all by taking a penny out of the capital fund at this point. So I guess if we're already there, we don't have anything to work up to. And if our goal ultimately down the road is 30, well, 27 is closer to 30. So that's where I'm at.
I just
Go
want to,
ahead. Sorry.
I just want to bring it back to this model though, so we're all kind of speaking in the same way. So at 2027, to get to 25% reserve ratio, and it's just a model, reductions would be about 400K. And I just want to, that's exactly right. So that's where I'm saying whether the reserve ratio floor is 25% or 20% or 30%, to me, where the rubber really meets the road is our second conversation when we actually model out and stress test these different revenue levers. And these numbers will dynamically change, no amusement tax, no parking and mobility. And those numbers will all change. So to me, like, I'm comfortable conceptually with the floor being the 3 million or 3.2 million that the city was comfortable with. But if I'm outvoted and it's 25% floor, at the end of the day, the important part of the conversation will be that line in yellow that answers the central true north question, which is how and when we stop using reserves to fund operations. That's it. So I'm just saying it puts a little bit more weight on the second conversation in September because that's the deep dive on what's behind that. My bias is to have the floor a little bit lower because I think just having that extra flexibility and knowing we would still be able to respond to certain things that come up. But I also recognize that other people don't feel that way. What? Why?
That mean in terms of when you said, just help me articulate in different words what you just said in the last paragraph.
So just take 2027.
Yeah.
If it sounds like most of the council is comfortable with a higher reserve ratio, row 57. I'm saying I'm comfortable with a lower floor. That's all. So that would impact
reserve.
a lower reserve
And
ratio.
then you said
Okay.
something else that I just wanted to understand.
Sure, press on.
Okay, as a result, so you're comfortable with a lower reserve because of, just help me, because you said something that I just want you to.
No, I'm saying the higher the reserve ratio, the more reductions we're going to need to do. And we'll see that with more specificity in our second conversation. And all I'm saying as a governing body, in my view, I'd like a little bit more flexibility. That's all. So the number at 27% reserve ratio, let's just say in the model, there's lots of assumptions here. John, you're as sharp as it gets. That number, I think, is 600,000. If it were 30%, it'd be higher. I'm just saying I'm comfortable with the ending reserves being lower. That's all.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay.
And I think an additional piece, right, is that you said you are still trying, your eye is still on the goal of us not needing to take from reserves and that is still a goal.
I think, but we really won't be able to stress test it. We really, in my view, although this is a wonderful start and I love this as a baseline, we really won't be able to get to the heart of the matter until we actually see all the levers. And I'm completely aligned with needing to see that level of specificity and potential creative thinking around additional revenue. For 27, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Gloria.
I think Counselor Chandler has summed up my feelings succinctly. So,
And I
So-
agree with her as well.
So the 27, I think you mentioned.
Yeah,
that.
don't touch reserves. Keep it at 27. if there's an emergency, to Nate's point, that comes up, in the middle of 27 or in March of 27 or in August of 27, and we think, oh my God, we want to reduce that 27% because X emergency happened, we can certainly come back and revise it. But I would rather we do a balanced budget. We only spend what we take in. And that's going to be obviously spending more if we get the amusement tax passed and spending less if we can't get that passed. But I just want to keep it at 27. And I would love to see us, although I won't be on council for 28 or 29, so it doesn't matter what I think for those years. But I would love to see us move up to a 30% reserves. But I'm comfortable with the 3.8 million and some change that we have at the end of this year, presumably. Hopefully a tad higher, since Denise said she tends to overestimate some expenses, and hopefully we come back a little higher than 27%, but I don't want it to go below 27% for next year. And I'm comfortable for next year also at taking the 1.5 million of parking and mobility, but I, to Gloria's point, also would like to see what impact that would have in the future for 28 and 29.
And I just want to say that I do feel like your opinion on 28 and 29 for purposes of planning, I think is still going to be important. So even though you won't be on council, I think that this can be a guiding document. And so I don't want you to stop at that year.
I won't stop.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So I'm hearing people say that they don't want reserves touched, and I'm hearing 27%. But if you look at this scenario, our ending reserves are 3.6 from 38. So which are you driving to?
Well, that's because of the yellow
Right,
line.
right.
It says and reductions in this chart. I'm not agreeing with this.
No, what I'm talking about is look at your beginning reserves are 3.8. And because the budget's being cut, you're dropping your reserves to 3.6. So there's two things at play here. Some people are saying we don't want to touch the reserves, and some people are saying 27%. I'm asking, which are you saying we're doing?
I don't want to touch reserves.
But I think you're looking at a percentage, not a total amount.
I'm looking at the dollar amount. If it's because there's some variability, I'm looking at the dollar amount. I don't want us to touch reserves. If it goes up to 3.85, if it goes up to 3.9, that would be lovely. I don't think we should touch reserves. I like reserves to be for emergencies, not operating expenses. And I would like us to not touch reserves, and I would like us to not touch the money in capital that we have set aside in the future. I just want us to spend whatever we can take in. If we take in a heck of a lot more because of some other new revenue generating ideas that Nate or someone comes up with, that's groovy. But I just don't want us to spend more than we bring in. I want it to be a so-called balanced budget.
Denise, could you go back and put the 27% in there just for a second? Because I have a question for finance, Nate. Right, but so the way, and Nate, maybe I'm not reading that right. So how I was reading this is in order to stay at 27% reserves, we begin with a $3.8 million reserve. And at the end of fiscal year 2027, we end up with a reserves of 3.629, but we're still at 27%.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that, because what we were talking about is we're at 27. Had this big goal of getting to 27. This still keeps us at 27. So I guess I'm, explain, could you just like articulate, am I right or wrong in reading this?
You are correct.
I think Carrie's question is really prudent here then, because some of us are talking about dollars and some of us are talking about percentages. So I think we just need
That's
to.
why I said from the very get-go, I feel like we have to go by percentages. If we start using dollar amounts, I mean, we could say 10 years from now, 3 million could be a very smaller percentage based on operating expenses.
Okay, so I will go on record as saying I'm willing to stay at 27% reserves.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Gloria, John, 27. Okay. So at this point, there is a majority of council that is looking at that 27%. We'll bring Julie up to speed at some point. And so, okay. And then again, I think that sort of list that we've been working off, we added options to increase, which I think you probably love. That's how you live your life, is in that realm. So we'll continue to work on that. And let's see, where are we? Yep, go ahead, John.
I want to just remind council several things. 4 years ago, okay, and Denise, tell me if I'm wrong. 4 years ago, we had no revenue that we could use from parking and mobility to pave streets by, right?
4 years ago, I can't remember, but soon as we started the enterprise, we put money from the enterprise to pave streets.
But it was like a little amount, like
It
maybe
was 300,000, maybe 200 to 300,000. Then we increased it every year. We also put, we have been using parking and mobility since the time it started as an enterprise to help fund streets.
Right.
So it's been used from the
Right.
time it was
But
started.
I guess the reason why I wanted you to kind of confirm that number, okay, is because I really do believe that we had a vision in terms of several things with parking and mobility. I think we really felt that we owed it to essentially the residents of downtown and Ruxton that with the rebuilding of the Cog Railway, we knew they were going to buy more rolling stock. We knew they were going to add more trains. In fact, they completely rebuilt the depot and added another boarding platform. You don't just do that just because you want to. You're doing that because you got more people that you're moving up and down the hill. Okay. So, and you can go back and look in the PUC numbers that they have increased their ridership. Okay. All right. But we also knew, okay, that was going to mean more visitors that were going to be here. And we did not want all of that traffic going through downtown and up Ruxton in pursuit of parking places. So this is why we did the Dillon, okay, near an interchange, okay, and had this vision. And yes, there were some people who said, you know what, the Dillon would never pay for itself, okay? And maybe that's still a question, okay? This year, we had nice revenues for it, but it was largely because Hiawatha wasn't even available because we had it all under construction. So I guess what I want to encourage the council to see is that look at that number. That's almost 10% of our budget. Okay. And in terms of by smartly managing, okay, visitor amenities, then in my opinion, are a value. Okay. I don't think we're fleecing anybody with this. I think we're actually offering a really good product to our community. You've heard me talk about that from the standpoint of wanting a nexus of restrooms to parking spaces, because I believe that people, when they come and park, go watch them park and go see. That's one of the first things they do is they go take a wee. Okay. All right. Okay. And visitor communities, I think, who have a high acuity to having those kinds of things, okay, have better visitor experiences and have better sales tax. And so I want us we did not have the ability to do the Dillon had we not had good capital and good reserves, okay, to do those kind of things. And I think that the new council members need to be looking for those opportunities in the future and not thinking that, oh, everything's just static here, okay? I think we need to be looking for these opportunities where we give our visitors a better experience that's here. And by the same token, reduces the impact on our local residents as far as traffic and pollution and congestion and things like that in terms of how we're managing these things. And I think by us not having capital projects and actually having the personnel, I agree with Denise on this. We need the personnel to manage these capital projects, okay? So that means maybe we need to think about what other personnel, I hate to say it, that aren't about the business of managing these capital projects that we possibly need to let go of, okay? Or do some job sharing or do some other kinds of things with them, okay? So that line up there that has been going up over the years happened. Parking and mobility, okay, which is a new source of revenue that we knew, okay, and Natalie and I actually had some kind of little differences of opinion, okay, in terms of how we were going to set that fund up. And in the end result, okay, it actually worked the way I think at heart what we both wanted, okay, which is that we wanted to be able to use those funds, okay, for transportation and parking and mobility that actually ended up, supplanting some of our general fund, donations to it. So I just want, I think that I would hate to see us raid the reserves, okay, to just sustain just business as usual, as opposed to us asking, how can we down here at City Hall, okay, be more efficient, deliver as good or better product as possible? I think that's our challenge, and I think that's the challenge in any organization these days, whether you're a private money-making business or not, is how in the world do you continue to deliver a really great product? Okay, everybody's under cost pressures. Okay, so this is the easy slide. The hard slide to me for this day is, what are we going to do so that we communicate to the community if 4.3 does not pass? Okay, what is going to happen down here in terms of our service level delivery to the community? Because in my opinion, that scenario there has to be something that we talk to this community about. And I think they need to know what it is. And I think that's a really important one. And even if you reduce that fund, that number 28, like Nate says there, even if you skosh that down a little bit or whatever, the types of reductions that we have to make, okay, I think have to be, people have to understand what that means in this community, what those numbers mean. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, let's take a break. Are we about ready for lunch?
It's coming at 11:30.
11:30.
I think we need a break, actually,
We
but
need a break.
Yeah.
We'll take a
Yeah.
break. Okay.
Yep.
Let's take a break. The mayor said, take a break. I know.
just looked up and thank you, Elena. Okay, let's see. I just kind of want to go over where we are today up to this point. So I feel like we have, as far as the agenda goes, we again discussed reserves. We discussed mobility and parking funds to some degree. We went through the different scenarios and gave staff direction to continue working on scenario 2 and scenario 4. And so I think that at this point, I'm looking at the desired outcome, and it says, by the conclusion of the retreat, council should provide a clear policy direction regarding reserve usage, mobility and parking fund transfers, and the preferred budget balancing strategy so staff can finalize development of the proposed 2027 budget. And again, just to kind of go through different items that we would like to use in this discussion. And one of them was to look at, again, 10 years of the use of capital funds. So really kind of tracking what any decrease in that line item really means to the community. Again, following those two scenarios, scenario 2 and 4. And then I think continuing to have that conversation as a council, if we do want to look at some sort of a policy as a council on how we would like to handle reserves. And that isn't as time sensitive, but that is something I think that we want to work on. I did hear that from everyone. I'm looking at some kind of a policy. Again, I think one thing that there are a few things that I think are hanging out there that again will come, I think, as we move forward with the budget. But one of them is that parking and mobility funding that I think we all know and recognize that it's necessary for that transfer now. But do we want to sort of give guidance to staff on what that looks like moving forward, as if there's a goal toward, again, whether we maintain that 1.5, whether we look at different options there. So I think that's still out for conversation. Again, that reserve piece, looking at that 27% for right now. And then, again, options to increase revenue through various things, whether it's the fee schedule, vacant use, vacant occupancy, or whatever that looks like, taxes, things like that. Am I missing anything in terms of what we would like staff to work on for next steps for us?
Just a minor that I had mentioned at the beginning, I think it would be helpful. And Nate had said it wouldn't be a big lift for him just to see the other cities if they're actually using their reserves. I mean, it's just an interesting data point, not a priority item, but I think it would be good.
Okay. And I think just to specify again, the difference between using reserves for general operating versus using
Yeah,
our reserves for
exactly.
capital projects and
Absolutely,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. That'd be interesting. I don't know how you find that out, but I'm sure it's out there.
Yeah, just to look at their audits posted on their website. I could probably deduct from that,
Right.
but yeah.
Or I'd recommend just calling the finance director if they'll
Yeah.
take your call.
Okay. I'm sure it's not something they want
After
to
you've
brag
done all
about.
your budget prep.
I know. I was gonna say.
Yeah, let's put that lower on the priority list.
Okay. All right. So, so again, do you feel like that's enough direction for staff to move forward with next steps so that when we come together again to discuss the next iteration of the budget conversation, that this helps us get to that next step, that next phase?
Yeah.
Does that mean September 12?
It's a good question. I
I think
actually,
they need to have a time frame.
right.
This is a lot.
Yeah, I think this is a lot for the 12th. And additionally, I think that we can work on this, I think, through work sessions as well. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a Saturday, that again, we can get a lot of work done even in a good solid hour. And even if, again, we have to have it on the agenda multiple times as we move forward. But I think that, we take steps and move forward with decisions, but then we need more info and then we can take steps and, sort of make informed decisions moving forward so that we feel fully ready in October. Do we feel comfortable working on this through work sessions versus a Saturday retreat? Julie?
The reason I would prefer to reserve Saturday, the 12th of September, and I'm not objecting to the idea of using work session time as well, but if we're looking at an overall package, And how are we going to make this budget work? And if we're being asked to make decisions about where we want to make cutbacks, it may be tricky to do that 45 minutes here and an hour there. Because so much of this is intertwined. So, and some things we may be able to talk about in isolation, one or two cuts to this or that, but I want to at least reserve this Saturday, the 12th. And if we end up deciding, oh my gosh, we're done, we don't need the 12th, we can always just take it off the calendar, but I love it to be there as a placeholder.
Denise, I was gonna say, you don't think you'll be ready by the 12th?
No, I would prefer, if we're gonna do it, is that we look at like either the week of the 21st or 28th, to look at it at that point. And I think if we could do like a Thursday afternoon, if we did it like from 2 to 5, or if you did a work session and started at 2, that may be beneficial too, instead of starting at 5, so that you can do it. So maybe on September 22nd, we don't have a meeting scheduled, so maybe we could just do a work session on September 22nd and start at 2 in the afternoon.
Well, we have 2 budgets to approve, with and without a tax increase. And it looks like that's going to require us to make certain cuts from where we are with our spending this year. I don't see how we're going to do that from 2 to 5
Well,
in an
we-
afternoon.
Well, again, just to, so we would have the 22nd.
Then
We
you
could
have the
also
8th.
have,
I don't want to wait till last minute till October because I know what happened last October and I'm not willing to go there.
I know.
Julie, you have October 8th, then you have October 10th, then you don't have to approve the budget till December 10th. You can have another
Yeah,
work
but there's no
session
way
after
for us
that.
to really meet
and another
extra
session.
during like Thanksgiving and
I'm-
Christmas and people go away. And last October, we were supposed to have a Saturday budget meeting and almost nothing happened because we didn't have enough time. So that's why I'm uncomfortable with just reserving a few hours here and there. I want to have a good chunk of time, and I see no reason why we can't get started with some of this discussion on the 12th, even if Denise doesn't have every little detail ironed out in terms of her recommendations.
okay, well, I respect Denise's request that we look at something further in September. Because I do think having staff ready is an important part of this, but, and I also recognize that we have 10 hours scheduled already.
May I make a
Yep,
suggestion?
go ahead,
May-
Judith. Yep.
I appreciate that you need more time. I do. Perhaps we could break this into 2 sessions and do scenario 1, do one scenario on a work session on a Thursday for, maybe block out 3-4 hours. And then the second scenario on another Thursday in September, if that would be, is that workable for you? And that way it would be on a weekday. And that way we can just really concentrate on one scenario at a time instead of going back and forth between 2. Just a thought.
What if we did, just a question, what if we did September 22nd, which is a Tuesday, a 2 to 5 or a 1 to 5, and then September 29th, a 2 to 5 or a 1 to 5?
I mean-
The 29th, that went Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday. I could do that.
I can do that as well. Gloria's no?
No.
You can't start at 2, but you could start later. Okay, at
Oh.
the end of September.
Oh,
And just for fun, I'm gone the 16th to the 20th. I'm gone the 16th to the 20th. Gloria's gone the 20th to the,
16th, October after. That's more the reason why we should do September 4th.
yeah, except that it doesn't actually work. I mean, that
I'm sorry, Mayor,
Mhm.
what days are you going?
I leave on the 16th and I come back on the 20th.
but Gloria's gone the last 2 weeks of September.
From the 16th on,
Mhm.
the rest of the month of September is shot.
Correct.
Can either of you appear by Zoom?
This is a tough meeting to
I
do. by
mean-
That
Zoom.
too.
I mean, there's
My-
2 days I could do it, but not for hours.
Hmm.
I mean, this is the first vacation I'm taking in 4 years. I'd like to spend.
Yeah, no, it was just a question. I didn't know if it was a work thing or what.
Mm-mm.
Either Saturday the 19th or Saturday the 3rd of October before I think we really need to meet before the other two sessions.
What if we did October 1st and 2nd, Thursday, Friday, half a day on the 1st, 12 to 5, and half a day on the 2nd, 12 to 5?
I have First Friday Art Walk on Friday, so we'd have to start a little earlier.
How about if we did 8 to 12?
That's fine.
So we did a 12 to 5 on the 1st. She'll be back. You'll be back then? Oh,
Oh,
so what if we did the 5th and the 6th?
that's
What
fine.
days of the week are those?
Monday,
Mondays and
Tuesday.
Tuesdays.
I can't do Tuesday.
Okay.
So what if we did Monday and Wednesday?
Wednesday or-
Monday,
Well,
at-
we have meeting until we're set up for, we have two.
right, you have, but what if we did the 5th at
8th.
least? What if we did the 5th, Monday, the 5th, start at 9 and go until it's done?
All day Monday, October 5th, you're proposing, Denise?
9 to 1, 9 to 2, 9 to,
9 to
And go through both.
and go
9 to
through both.
whatever.
So October 5th.
Is that okay? Gloria? You good?
Is that
Okay.
the only
Mm.
day we're gonna have? like,
No,
on the
then you have the
calendar?
8th, then you have the 10th, then you can schedule any other meetings that you need
So we have
for
about
October.
15 hours scheduled that week to talk about
So
the
what's
budget.
the 8th?
The 8th will be your discussion because we will have already given you our perspective on the 5th. We'll give you the two budgets.
Oh, the 5th is just your presentation
Nope,
period?
nope, I'm just gonna, we're not doing a presentation. I'm just giving you this budget.
So the 5th starts at 9, and then what are you proposing for the 8th?
For you guys to tell me what you need for the 8th.
Yeah, typically,
So the 5th, we're bringing back all this that you just requested from
Mhm,
us
that'd
on
be
the
great.
5th.
So
Yep.
we could change the definition.
So October 5th from 9 until we'll book 9 to 5.
Okay.
And the same, the 8th?
And then the 8th, we have booked all morning, I believe.
Yeah, and
you'll
I
give us
won't be
direction.
here for part of that. I had to schedule a doctor's appointment that can't, if I postpone it, I have to wait several months and it's not safe.
Okay.
So, and when I saw that it was just on the calendar so that department heads can give us their spiel about what they're doing and what they want to do, I figured I can always read about it because they put it in writing too. So, that wouldn't be a good day for me in terms of budget discussion. I thought that was just gonna be department presentation day.
So what time is your doctor appointment?
I think it's like 10 to 11:30 or
Right,
something.
so
like that.
let's do it in the afternoon.
I could do 1 to 5.
On the 8th, 1 to 5.
If you need it, we'll get it booked. So if you need it,
And if you still want the departments to do their presentation that morning, I don't mind at all.
Okay.
On the 8th
Missing
down,
that.
week
Okay.
From 1 to 5. The 8th, 1 to 5.
hmm
And the 5th is.
The 5th is 9 to
Fifth is
5.
9 until,
that is 9 till whenever.
And then
And
the 10th is 9 until,
and then the 10th is hopefully the final Saturday.
well, except that we'll still have the budget to discuss in December as well. So we'll have,
Right, and if you need to add it to more meetings, we can do such.
okay.
And then do we have first and second reading already on the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
It's because we
So-
have to have it done by December.
Because there's a
15th.
Thursday, we have to do the 10th of December is the second reading.
I would
right?
like to see the proposed agenda for the rest of this year. I see
Proposed-
no reason for that to be
Yeah, okay.
a secret.
It's not a secret.
Okay, well, I understand it's modifiable and you've
Every
said in the
day.
past you're not comfortable letting us see it because it's modifiable.
That is not what I've said, Julie.
Okay, well, so then we can see it.
You can see it anytime you want to see it.
Okay, can you email it to
You
us
bet.
for the rest of the year?
You bet.
Thank you.
Town, I did make that request.
Yep.
Oh, I did see that.
Yep.
Yeah, because that would help, especially with this budget stuff coming up. So if we do have some last minute need to have further discussion, we can see what would have to be moved around. Okay.
All right.
Related to that, we have talked a couple of times about adjusting the fee schedule to add a new ordinance related to vacant properties.
Mhm.
So that would need to be on one of our agendas.
Which it
But
is.
we don't need an ordinance, do we, if it's on a feast? Do we, Denise?
We're gonna have to define what a vacant property is. You're gonna have
Okay.
to, so you're gonna have to have some type of ordinance to define it,
Got it.
what it entails. If somebody stores something, is that vacant or not? So there's a lot of work that has to go behind
bet.
the scenes. We just need direction from this council. Go and put something together. Then I will have to task that to planning and say, go and work on all this, because there's a lot of details and a lot of, um, uh,
Nuances.
yeah, nuances and definitions that have to be very clear on that one. So if I'm tasked with that, I'll give it to planning and say, when can we bring that back?
And so that's already on the
That-
agenda?
that we're Discussing this.
I believe that's all. I know the department heads are working on it, but I believe that's the only new fee that we have. If you want to get it this year, we're going to have to really work on it. We haven't gotten that on, but we can definitely put that on our task if that's the direction I receive from all of council.
Okay.
Maybe propose. So we have a council meeting on the 18th next, that's coming up. It's in a couple of days, to maybe have any other creative revenue ideas that maybe would require staff time that could be presented then or provided, or if we have those ideas, just to send them to Denise.
We just send them to Denise, right?
Okay, that sounds good. Well, I don't want to kick off you doing any work unless there's consensus. That's what I was being sensitive to, but I'm happy to share any ideas.
I think if you send them to me, then I can compile a list and say, here are some thoughts. Which ones do you want us to tackle? And then we can manage it from there.
Okay. All right. So with that, do I have any additional items for today? I feel like we made some progress and, we scheduled some things, which is important. I don't think anyone's even paying attention, so I think that means we're done.
No, I wanted to bring up just an idea, and that is and it just to think about having the Crane budget not under the auspices of the Chamber Visit Manitou, and have it in on its own line item and funded separately from Visit Manitou Springs. And my rationale for that is we are a creative arts district, and we want to maintain that. And if we're discussing any cuts, potential cuts, I don't know if we will be, but if there are, potential discussions around reducing the chamber budget, I'm concerned that that Crane might be impacted by that. So it's just a suggestion to think about that. And when we come back together, for our next meeting, we can pursue that a little.
We didn't address the economic development portion today, which I think is fine. I think it makes sense to bring it up as we move forward. So this is, again, there's a draft discussion item that we can add to and change as needed. And so this is just sort of that foundational document we can work off. But we will continue to carry this around with us as we.
If we're making lists, I
Mhm,
mean,
mhm.
where isn't the Mineral Springs falling under the chamber also?
It's
Or
not
no?
currently. So my understanding, and maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, 50,000 comes out of the water enterprise and 30,000 comes out of the general fund currently. So there's no attachment to it
okay.
currently.
You're just thinking about a proposal that was in Denise's memo, but it was just a proposal.
So, okay.
Again, not my memo, it was Natalie's memo. So, and I just want to mention that area, the economic development area, I never touch that. That is for you guys to decide how those funds go. And you can allocate so much to whatever area you want to allocate to.
Okay, excellent. Thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So we're ending at 12:15.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.